Captain Oliver strode toward his house with a bitter look on his face, chewing the tip of his finger as he muttered under his breath. Why did that bastard get to change the plan at the last second? I was this close, he hissed, voice thick with resentment. He wins everyone over in less than a week, and now that idiot is feeding him supplies, they'll worship him even more. I have to get that ring. His eyes darkened. I'll just steal it, he growled. Where is that useless son of mine? I need him. He lengthened his stride, but by the time he reached the village streets, his expression had softened into a pleasant, harmless smile. Anyone seeing him now would never imagine the poison running through his thoughts. Unfortunately for Oliver, he wasn't nearly as hidden as he believed. A short distance away, shrouded from sight by a cloaking spell, DeAndre and Alara trailed him in silence. DeAndre's expression was as flat as ever. Alara's was cold and tense. That guy's really slippery. No wonder Rowan couldn't pin him, DeAndre murmured. Keep your voice down, Alara snapped, giving him a sharp elbow. We need to see what he does next. Even if we shouted in his ear, he wouldn't hear a thing, DeAndre replied lightly, explaining his spell. Quiet, Alara cut him off, gaze fixed on the man who'd been risking her people's lives by feeding information to their enemies. Seeing she wasn't in the mood, DeAndre kept his mouth shut and followed. Still, he couldn't help thinking how she was always so sharp with him, but soft with Rowan. They shadowed Oliver for a few more minutes until he slipped into a small mound house at the edge of the village. They crept closer, stopping just outside. Voices drifted through the thin walls. What happened to your face, Judus? Who did that to you? Oliver's confused voice came first. Stannis did, a young man replied, teeth clearly clenched. Even from outside, the hatred in his tone was obvious. At that name, Alara's eyes widened. Her hands curled into fists. You know him? DeAndre murmured, noting her reaction. Yes, she said tightly. He's one of Glenwood's strongest captains, and a complete monster. So the old snake has help? DeAndre muttered. He's not acting alone. Inside, Oliver sounded furious. Stannis? How in the hell did you run into Stannis? Did you go to Glenwood after everything I told you? What if Lord Rowan found out? I never left Winterseed, Judus spat. He came here in the night while you were in that meeting. He asked about 5 women from Winterseed who escaped their village after killing 3 of their soldiers. I tried to clear up the misunderstanding, but he just beat me and nearly crushed my balls. They still hurt, father. I don't even know if I can give you a grandchild now. Oliver went silent for a moment. Stannis coming to Winterseed hadn't been part of the plan, and he knew better than anyone how violent the man's temper was. After some ranting and half-hearted consoling, Oliver finally got to the point. Listen carefully. You're going to steal the ring from Lord Rowan. I'll use the chance to slip out of the village and report to Lord Fagin. Can you handle that? I can, Judus replied immediately. As long as it helps you become the village leader and makes me your successor. A few minutes later, the door opened. Father and son stepped out and went their separate ways, convinced their little scheme was safely hidden. DeAndre snorted. They've got guts, I'll give them that. Plotting against Rowan like this. Alara, however, was pale and restless. We have to move now. You can use magic. Deal with them for the village's sake, she urged. DeAndre shook his head. No. What? Alara demanded, voice trembling. Why don't you want to help? Rowan has to handle this himself, DeAndre said quietly. I've already pushed my limits helping him, and I only did it because of you. He flashed her a smile, trying to lighten the mood. She didn't react. We'll go to Lord Rowan. Now, DeAndre felt a sting of being brushed off again, but he didn't argue. He opened a portal and stepped through with her, returning to the meeting hall where Rowan was waiting. The moment they appeared, Rowan stood. How did it go? Exactly like you predicted, DeAndre said. He has an accomplice, his son. The son is on his way here to steal the ring, and the father plans to slip out and head to Glenwood, he continued. Also, from what we heard, one of Glenwood's captains is already somewhere near your territory. Rowan's eyes widened. And you left that part for last, why? He snapped. DeAndre only shrugged. Lord Rowan, we must hurry. Alara cut in, worry etched on her face. The captain they mentioned is very powerful and very experienced. In Glenwood, He's known as their best swordsman. She quickly explained who Stannis was, his strength, the way he'd lusted after her and the other women, and his plan to topple Lord Fagin and seize Glenwood for himself. He told us all of it himself, she finished. He likes to boast. The more Rowan heard, the more a cold urge to kill settled into his chest. A man with that kind of ambition and cruelty was dangerous, but also easy to manipulate. "Thank you, Elara," Rowan said. "I'm sorry we haven't introduced you and your friends to the village properly yet. When I come back from the war, I'll throw a feast for you and for Winterseed's freedom." Elara nodded slightly. "We'll look forward to it. Have you eaten?" Rowan asked, suddenly remembering he hadn't arranged food for them. "Rowan, I'm a merchant," DeAndre said with a roll of his eyes. "You think I travel without supplies? There's more food in that carriage than what you handed out today." He shot Elara another charming look as he bragged. Rowan snorted at the attempt, secretly pleased when she ignored DeAndre completely. Still, he couldn't help wondering how such a small carriage could carry several women and so much food. When he asked, Elara explained the carriage's inner space and the storage enchantments built into it. Rowan was stunned and immediately wanted one, until DeAndre casually mentioned the price. That killed the idea instantly. Now that he was sure the women were safe and stocked, Rowan saw Elara off. DeAndre opened another portal and sent her back. Once she was gone, Rowan and DeAndre went over supplies again. Rowan added building materials, wood, iron or galvanized steel, gravel, and more weapons, a few skills, and extra food. He couldn't buy any new blueprints. He'd already purchased his limit. It didn't bother him. After this war, he would have more than enough to buy whatever he wanted. His territory would finally evolve. That thought lasted all of 5 seconds. "Fuck," DeAndre suddenly cursed, glaring at an invisible prompt only he could see. Rowan narrowed his eyes. "What now?" "The tournament of merchants is starting," DeAndre groaned. "Right now?" By late morning, the bright mood that had swept through Winterseed earlier had faded into uncertainty. "Darlin', please come back safe," Clarissa whispered, looking up at Roland with worried eyes. The baby in her arms giggled, stretching his tiny hands toward his father, completely oblivious to the tension between his parents. Roland took his son and lifted him high, making the boy laugh even harder before pulling him close. "Lord Rowan is going to lead us to greatness," he said with a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, I'll be back soon. When I am, this village won't be under anyone's heel anymore, and our son will grow up in the same peace we once had." Clarissa could only nod and pray silently for his safe return and the village's victory. Roland was still playing with his son when someone banged on the door. "Captain Roland," 2 young soldiers shouted from outside, panic clear in their voices. Clarissa's head snapped toward the door, anxiety spiking. "What's happening?" she asked, taking the baby back from him. "I don't know," Roland said, forcing a small smile. "Don't worry, those brats always run like the sky is falling." He squeezed her shoulder and hurried outside. Clarissa followed him out. The 2 soldiers straightened at the sight of her and bowed quickly before turning to Roland. "Sir, we need to go to the north boundary immediately. You have to see this for yourself," one of them blurted. Their urgency made Clarissa's heart tighten, but she stepped aside and let them go. Roland grabbed his sword and took off with the soldiers. "Tell me exactly what's going on," he demanded as they ran. "We're not sure," one replied. "The troops are all gathered at the northern border. We heard they caught a traitor, someone who's been leaking information to Glenwood." "A traitor?" Roland's brows knitted. The idea felt unreal. He had never once believed anyone from Winterseed would dare betray their own village. Could it be him? The thought hit him like a stone. He sped up, leaving the younger soldiers struggling to keep pace. They soon encountered Captain Josh and Bryce, also running hard toward the border. "So you heard too?" Josh said between breaths. "Yeah," Bryce growled. "A damn traitor in our midst. If that's true, I'll kill the bastard myself." Roland stayed silent and pushed ahead. When they reached the northern boundary, a huge crowd of soldiers had already formed a tight ring. "Clear a path," Roland ordered. The men stepped aside immediately, and the captains pushed through to the front. What they saw made them stop cold. Rowan stood there, eyes burning with a fury they had never seen on his face before. Blood stained his hands. At his feet lay two battered, barely recognizable figures, groaning and twitching in pain. Roland's eyes widened as he recognized them. "Oliver, and Judus," he said quietly. He was stunned but oddly calm. Bryce wasn't. Face dark, he turned to the nearest soldier. "Why are they on the ground?" "They're the traitors, sir," the soldier answered quickly. "They've been feeding information to Glenwood. Lord Rowan and that white-haired merchant exposed them with a trap." Bryce didn't wait to hear the rest. "Oliver, you bastard! How dare you!" he roared, surging forward. He drove his fist straight into Oliver's face. And then another, and another. Oliver screamed in pain, but no one moved to help him. After the beating Rowan had already given him, he could barely lift his arms. He could only lie there and take it as Bryce's fists crashed down again and again. "That's it, Captain Bryce. Beat that traitor. Crush his balls while you're at it." The younger soldiers shouted, venting their rage without restraint. Roland watched with a hard expression. Oliver had been his friend since childhood, but to him, anyone who gambled with the village's life and betrayed their own people was no friend at all. Rowan stood silently, watching, but his mind was elsewhere. He was still turning over the last thing DeAndre had told him before leaving for the merchant tournament. "Build your territory and your followers fast, Rowan. The first tournament of Outworlders could arrive at any time, and death won't be off the table." Outworlders. That was what the system called transmigrators like him. DeAndre had given him a lot of information before teleporting away, and left his carriage behind as a gift to mark their new partnership. Thinking of that, Rowan tightened his resolve. He would grow this territory. He would get stronger. His gaze returned to Oliver, and the anger in his eyes deepened. He opened his inventory and pulled out the dagger he'd bought from DeAndre. The blade was sleek and black, cold and dangerous, catching the light in a way that made the crowd fall quiet even before he spoke. "What I'm about to do," Rowan said, stepping toward Oliver and Judus, "is a warning for anyone who ever thinks about betraying our trust and our love." Bryce stepped back, giving him room. "Winterseed has always been a peaceful, tight-knit village," Rowan continued. "Until now, no one has dared betray their own people. I will not allow such stupidity to take root while I am village head." The soldiers watched him with a mix of respect and fear. This wasn't the gentle smile they were used to. This was the side of him that carried all their hopes and all their rage. Roland swallowed and stepped forward. "Lord Rowan, Oliver has been a good villager since birth. We can't just kill him. We could imprison him, make him work off his crimes." "We don't have room to waste on traitors," Rowan replied, his voice as cold as the steel in his hand. "Anyone who endangers my people dies." Immediately, silence fell like a blanket over the border. Even Roland couldn't find the courage to argue again. "Please, Lord Rowan, spare me," Oliver choked out, realizing no one was going to step in anymore. He had felt a spark of hope when Roland spoke up, but it had died just as quickly with Rowan's answer. As Rowan came closer, Oliver felt his blood turn to ice. Death was walking toward him, step by step. I didn't know what I was doing. Lord Rowan, give me a second chance. I'll prove myself," he begged. He turned his head desperately. "Roland, Bryce, Bruce, Josh, help me." None of them answered. Bryce, Bruce, and Josh stared down with cold eyes. Only Roland's face showed a hint of pity, but even he didn't move. With death only moments away, Oliver's mind spun through everything he had planned. Years of scheming. Every careful step toward seizing control of Winterseed. He'd been so close, just days away from what he thought would be victory. And now, everything was crumbling apart at Rowan's feet. "No, I can't let it end like this. I won't." The young soldier's curses and jeers pounded in his ears, stoking his desperation and rage. But his body was broken. He could barely lift his head. With the last scraps of strength left in his throat, Oliver did the only thing he could. He threw his head back and screamed a single name at the top of his lungs, praying that whoever heard it would save him.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Rowan was just a few steps away from ending Oliver and Judu's when Oliver suddenly yelled out a name at the top of his lungs. Who is Stannis? Why is that bastard traitor calling the name? The soldiers whispered amongst themselves, and even the captains were confused. Bryce looked at Rowan as if requesting permission to attack, but Rowan declined his request. Stannis. Oliver's voice thundered across the northern border. His voice was so loud that even his own throat began to ache, but he didn't stop. This was his only hope of surviving. If Stannis was really here, as his son said, after hearing his call, he would attack, and the soldiers would be distracted, giving him the chance to escape death. With such a plan in his mind to save his head, he didn't bother slaving his own throat. Juduz looked at his father with puzzlement etched on his face and tried to stop him by yelling, "Dad, why are you calling his name?" But even that wasn't able to stop him. Roland and the other captains looked at Rowan, who stood just a foot away, wondering why he hadn't taken Oliver's life yet. Rowan was standing very close to Oliver. He only needed to swing his hands to kill Oliver and Juduz from this position, but he didn't. He simply stared at them with a cold gaze as his mind wandered. "You think drawing the attention of the bastard hiding in my territory will save you from getting killed? You're even more useless and stupid than I thought. Now you will not only die, but also help me catch the bastard hiding in my territory." Rowan waited for Oliver to halt his screaming. After Oliver stopped screaming, he turned to look at Rowan with a smirk. "There's a group of soldiers hiding close to our territory, and with the sound of my voice, they will attack the village and slaughter everyone if they find out I was killed," he said with a shaky voice, try to sound threatening. But Rowan just looked at him as though he was looking at a madman. "You have to leave me alone and let me leave in peace. Only then will they spare you." Seeing that Rowan was cracking to his threats, he added more, but it had no effect. Only Bryce and Roland were triggered. "Lord Rowan, he is talking shit. Give me permission to kill him." Bryce let out with anger in his voice. Josh and Bruce also joined him. Their hatred for Oliver grew after hearing him threaten to kill his fellow people. As for Roland, the last strand of friendship he had for Oliver died at that moment. Now he wanted nothing but to see him dead. "Lord Rowan, he has threatened our village. Give me the opportunity to crush his balls. Let us beat him to death. He deserves to be stoned to death for disrespecting you." The young soldiers yelled out in anger. The whole border was shrouded in killing intent. Everyone wanted the traitor dead, but Rowan had something else in mind. He held the dagger up with a cold expression. Seeing this, Oliver got scared and screamed for help once again. But this was what Rowan wanted. "Stannis, this is your chance," he screamed out. "Yes, call him out," Rowan grinned. He waited for a few minutes, and, just as he expected, from the bushes not too far away from the northern border, 15 Glenwood soldiers on horses appeared, riding toward the village with their swords lifted in the air. "Glenwood soldiers?" Winterseed soldiers cried out. Roland and the other captains were shocked, but they didn't hesitate before grabbing their swords and stepping forward towards the soldiers arriving. With the current pace of the horses and the distance between them, the Glenwood soldiers would likely arrive in the next 2 minutes or more. "I told you, those soldiers are stronger than everyone gathered here. They have trained in the arts of war and bloodshed from a young age," Oliver boasted with a crazed voice, grinning menacingly at Rowan. "You have to beg me to stop them, or else everyone will die, and then you will surrender and let me become ruler of Winterseed," he continued. Juduz looked at his father with relief. He was glad his father was smart enough to negotiate for their life with an intelligent plan. He was really proud. "Lord Rowan, you have trained us. We are prepared for war." "Do not listen to him," the young soldiers assured Rowan. They would rather die in war than let a heartless traitor rule over them. "You guys are nothing before them. They will kill you before you even know it." Oliver scoffed at the soldiers. He held Juduz, and both of them struggled to stand up despite the aching pain inflicting their bodies. "Who asked you to stand up?" Nevertheless, before they could stand up and walk away, Rowan's chilly voice reached their ears. His voice held no emotion, causing them to shiver. Didn't he hear what I said? Oliver panicked. Some of the soldiers watched Rowan with puzzlement, while the others, with swords in hand, went forward with the captain to stand against the approaching soldiers. Oliver, you are old, but your wisdom is almost non-existent despite the experience you've gathered, Rowan began chillingly. You betrayed my people, which is already too much and punishable by death. But now you have made it worse by threatening their lives, he continued. Oliver looked at him with fright, wondering how Rowan, who was no more than 19, was able to exude such a scary killing intent. Judas was more afraid. He hadn't lived enough and was sadly still a virgin. He wanted nothing more than to escape right now and never return. Why you should be pleading for your life right now, Rowan? Oliver's voice thundered. Pleading for my life? I think you've reversed the roles here, Oliver. What? Only I can stop them. You can't do anything. Rowan laughed menacingly at his foolishness. The Glenwood soldiers were just 60 seconds away from reaching them now. He had to act fast. He lifted the black dagger in his hand and walked towards Oliver, who kept threatening while shivering in fear. He raised the dagger, and Oliver closed his eyes. Is this how it is going to end? He thought, as he heard the sound of the dagger slicing through the air. Death was so close. He could feel it. Father. But suddenly, he heard the weak and pained voice of Judas. He quickly opened his eyes and was met with the most horrifying scene. The whole northern border fell silent. Only the faint cry of Judas and the neighing of Glenwood horses approaching from afar could be heard. Oliver turned his head sharply at the sound of his son's voice, his eyes widening in terror. Rowan stood close to Judas, the black dagger in his hand dripping with blood. Judas' eyes were wide open in terror as he stared at his severed right hand, lying on the ground beside him. His breathing came in ragged gasps, his body trembling uncontrollably. Oliver was still trying to comprehend the scene when Rowan moved again. The dagger in his hand blurred, and in the next moment, Judas' left hand hit the ground. No, my hands. My hands. Judas screamed in agony. He turned towards his father, who was standing right beside him, his eyes filled with a frantic plea for help. But the man he looked to for salvation could only stare back in horror. Oliver's eyes turned red with regret, anger, and sadness. This was never part of his plan. He couldn't even move to save his son. While he was still processing everything, Rowan signaled for the soldiers behind Oliver to grab him and drag him further away from Judas. Rowan made sure to keep his gaze fixed on Oliver. ensuring the father would witness every agonizing moment of his son's suffering, so he could truly feel helplessness and despair. Killing you is too merciful. I'll make you watch as I cut your son apart, piece by piece. I want you to experience true pain and regret, Rowan said coldly. Oliver, already traumatized by his son's excruciating pain, was further crushed by Rowan's words. Please just kill him, he begged. Kill him? No, that'll be mercy. Pain will claim him in the end, Rowan smirked. Keep them both under control, Rowan commanded the soldiers. If they try to move, beat them as much as you want, but don't kill them. I still have Glenwood bastards to deal with. With that, Rowan turned his back and walked away. Rowan, Oliver bellowed, his voice dripping with rage and hatred. You can't do this. You'll die if you face him. Only I can stop him from killing you. Free me and my son, and your village will survive. Oliver shouted desperately. But Rowan had already reached the captains and other soldiers, ignoring Oliver's plea. I used to respect you, Captain, but now my respect's dead, just like your balls after we're done here. One of the soldiers holding Oliver sneered with a smirk. Oliver was about to respond when a sharp kick landed between his legs. His eyes bulged in pain, and the other soldiers joined in, beating him while his son cried out, consumed by trauma and agony. Meanwhile, Stannis led his men fearlessly towards Winterseed. He had been hiding in the bushes, waiting for the right time to meet with Oliver when he heard a loud scream. At first, he was confused, wondering why someone would scream like that. But when the second scream came, he recognized it was the voice of Oliver and was a cry for help. Without wasting time, he ordered his 14 soldiers to mount their horses and charge toward Winterseed. They couldn't afford to let anything bad happen to their spy. As they broke through the bushes, they saw soldiers gathered around the border and were taken aback. Captain, we should fall back. There are too many of them. One of the soldiers riding next to him said, fear creeping into his voice. Stannis scoffed, telling the soldier to be bold and not fear such a small village like Glenwood. He didn't believe the village's soldiers could pose a real threat. From everything he had heard from Oliver and Judus, they're no big deal. And to be honest, why would he be afraid of a naive teenage lord like Rowan? As they charged towards Winterseed, Stannis wondered what had caused Oliver to scream so loudly. His thoughts were interrupted when he saw a young man step forward, standing before the Winterseed soldiers. This must be the young bastard Captain Wagga talked about, the naive, weak fool, Stannis noted to himself, eager to deal with him. On the other side, Rowan turned and quickly gave orders to his soldiers. No matter what, do not harm the horses. We will be needing them, he commanded. The Glenwood soldiers were now only a few meters away. Their faces were clear, their fearlessness evident as they charged, swords gleaming under the soft sunlight. Rowan's eyes locked onto Stannis, the man he had longed to kill ever since he learned about his deeds from Alara. Rowan summoned Blaze from the divine beast plane and gave him instructions to assist the soldiers. Blaze, seeing the serious mood of his tamer, agreed without protest. Rowan couldn't help but notice the newborn maturity in Blaze. His body was now a little bigger than it was before, and his cultivations was growing. Sadly, he couldn't focus on that details at this moment. He summoned his sword from his inventory, turned to his soldiers, and shouted, "Charge!" Yeah. The soldiers roared as they rushed forward. Stannis grinned, giving the order for his men to engage as well, while he rode his horse directly at Rowan. But Rowan wasn't going to let him slaughter through his soldiers to reach him, so he sprinted ahead, running twice as fast as the others. Within moments, he was at the front, his eyes locked on Stannis. His soldiers charged behind him, while Stannis' men moved forward as well. You're the naive lord of Winterseed. Huh? You look no different from any average teenage boy. I'll enjoy taking your head home with me. Stannis taunted as he charged at Rowan. Rowan didn't respond as he kept his focus on Stannis' hands. Alara had warned him about Stannis' skill with the sword, and Rowan wasn't ready to lose due to carelessness. Sword Grandmaster activated. Attack power and weapon efficiency increased by 300%. Seeing this notification, Rowan gripped his sword and his readiness intensified. Stannis leapt off his horse, landing beside Rowan and swinging his sword. The battle-trained horse immediately moved aside, away from the chaos. Rowan blocked the strike swiftly. "You've never trained in swordsmanship, for what I know. You won't last long against me." Stannis let out again, swinging once more. But Rowan blocked the blow effortlessly. Around them, the Glenwood and Winterseed soldiers clashed fiercely. The Glenwood soldiers dismounted and fought with precision, their swords slicing through the air with deadly intent. Though they were better trained, their smaller numbers gave the Winterseed soldiers the advantage. "You bastards!" Bryce cursed as he grabbed one of the Glenwood soldiers by the neck instead of using his sword. His large hands squeezed until the soldier passed out from lack of air. But Bryce didn't let him off freely and stabbed him to ensure he is completely dead. Roland swung his sword against another, overpowering his opponent with his size. He quickly disarmed him and ended the fight. The younger Winterseed soldiers fought in larger groups to compensate for their lack of skill. Though some sustained injuries, they were minor. Rowan and Stannis' battle raged on. At first glance, it appeared Stannis had the upper hand, but Rowan was holding back, waiting for the right moment to copy Stannis' skill. Copy didn't work on dead targets. As they fought, Rowan scanned his stats and found a skill he needed. Muscle strengthening, F permanent 200% boost in physical strength. Without hesitation, Rowan copied and merged with the skill. "You should give up now. I'll let you live long enough to watch me with your women." Stannis boasted, confident of his victory. Uno reverse. Rowan grinned as he blocked the next attack. Stannis looked at him as if he was looking at a madman. "What's this idiot saying?" he thought. Before Stannis could finish the thought, he noticed a change in their fight. Rowan's strikes grew faster, the force behind them stronger, pushing Stannis back. His eyes widened in disbelief, but before he could react, he felt something cold run through his flesh, and the world quickly went silent around him. While the battle raged on in the northern border of Winterseed, two white horses could be seen galloping down the lonely forest path leading to the village, pursued by a ferocious-looking group with more horses. It was still early morning in Glenwood, and the village was very busy due to the preparations for war. In the home of Lord Fagin, he could be seen speaking with Wagga and the other captains who remained after he had sent Stannis to get back his women. "Kill all the men and leave only the women," he commanded with hatred and anger in his voice. "Do not let a single male in that village live. Do you hear me?" The captains nodded in response. None of them refuted his insane orders. In fact, they wanted it that way, as it would give them unlimited access to the beautiful women who dwell in Winterseed. "We will go with the strategy we planned, except that we will be missing a captain," Lord Fagin continued after getting the response. He turned to Wagga. "You will be taking control of Stannis' men. Ensure you do a good job now that you have twice the number of soldiers the other captains have. You can count on me not to disappoint you, Lord Fagin." Wagga bowed with a smirk. As they were discussing, two guards from the Glenwood prison rushed into the room and announced in a panicked voice, "Lord Fagin, the Winterseed girl has escaped." "What?" Fagin's voice thundered across the hall with anger. "How did that happen? Where were you all when it happened?" "We don't know, sir. We were walking down the passageway, doing our hourly check when we found two of your men lying dead in front of her cell. We quickly rushed to check, only to find that she was gone." The two guards reported, fear evident in their voices, knowing what Lord Fagin could do to them. Fagin's eyes blazed with anger as he heard their report. First, he lost his favorite woman Alara and the others, and now the youngest and prettiest had escaped? How defenseless was his territory for these weak women to escape as they pleased? Wagga and the other captains looked among themselves, wondering how such a woman could kill two well-trained guards and escape without being caught. "Someone helped her," Wagga said matter-of-factly. "That young lady is not capable of killing anyone. She doesn't even know enough about the prison's premises to escape without getting caught." The other captains nodded in agreement. Even Lord Fagin found his words believable. He had been with those women and they didn't seem like people who could hurt a fly, let alone a well-trained soldier. There was definitely someone helping them. Just as he was about to respond, two other soldiers ran into the room, the same ones he had sent to call Ren. "Where is Run?" "I told him to come with you," he asked with a frown on his fat face. "Sir, we searched everywhere and couldn't find him. Not even his wife and daughters were around." The soldier's report caused the room to fall silent. At that moment, everything started to fall into place. Lord Fagin furrowed his brow. "Ren never told me he was leaving, and why would he take his family with him?" His eyes widened as the thought struck him, and he turned to Waga and the other captains. "Ren has been the bastard helping them. We need to stop him. Send some men after him, and gather the rest. We leave for war immediately." Liera and Ren were riding beside each other on white horses, heading out of Glenwood's territory. Liera wore brown clothes and a brown cloak that completely hid her face from anyone looking at her. Under her cloak, she wore a scared expression, fearing that death would soon be upon her. Ren glanced at her, seeing her shivering, and couldn't help but whisper a warning as they approached the gate. "Keep calm, Liera. We just need to pass through the gate, and we'll be on our way to your people." Hearing Ren's calm words, she nodded and fought her hardest to maintain her composure. The exit of Glenwood was just a few meters away. The 7 guards at the gate had already seen them approaching, but remained calm, knowing Run. "Sir Run, where are you headed this early in the morning?" one of them asked with a smile as they approached. "I'm taking my daughter out of the village for a while to get some herbs for her fever. We'll be back soon." Ren lied with a smile. His face was calm, and his composure steady. The guards didn't detect any falseness in his words. They observed Liera, whose body was hidden, but they could see her shivering intensely. "Will she be okay? She looks really sick," they asked with concern. In the village, Ren's daughters were some of the most beautiful maidens, and many young men were quite interested in them. "She'll be fine once she takes the herbs," Ren replied. Without further questions, the guards opened the gate, and they both rode through freely. They kept their horses at a normal pace, galloping gently further away from Glenwood, as if they weren't escaping. Ren whispered to Liera to ensure she was okay. "You claim to know all of Sir Ren's daughters well. Which one do you think is with him?" one guard asked. "It's definitely Rachel, the slim and curvy one," another replied. The guard discussed as they closed the gate. They returned to their posts and began talking about the war, rejoicing over the new winter seed women who would be brought back. They were already making plans on how to woo the women. However, almost 30 minutes later, 15 soldiers on horses rode toward the gate. "Did anyone leave through the gate?" the one in front asked urgently. The guards exchanged confused looks before one of them replied, "Oh yes, Sir Ren left with his daughter to get some herbs for her fever. She looked really sick." "Which daughter? Did you see her face?" The soldiers followed up with another question. This time, the guards' heartbeats quickened as they realized they had messed up. They hadn't bothered to check her face. All they knew was that she was a lady because she had breasts. "No," they replied, ashamed and embarrassed. The soldier in front cursed under his breath, gripping the reins tightly. "Open the gate immediately," he barked. Embarrassed and worried, the guards rushed to open the gate. "What's happening?" one of the younger guards asked, his face pale as the soldiers spurred their horses and rode off at full speed, leaving a cloud of dust behind. "I don't know, but we're surely in big trouble," an older guard replied. Further down the winding path leading away from Glenwood, Run and Liera continued their ride, the morning breeze brushing against their worried faces as they drifted toward Winterseed. Liera was still shivering with fear. Even the sound of rustling leaves made her terror intensify. Ren glanced back at her and spoke in a low, reassuring tone. "We're already out of Glenwood. With these horses, we'll reach Winterseed before they catch us." Liera nodded, trying to push aside the overwhelming sense of dread. She still recalled the scene at the prison when Run and a guard came to rescue her. Sadly, the guard had been killed in a fight against another guard who tried to stop them from escaping. Both guards stabbed each other and died in front of her. As she recalled the tragic moment, the sound of horses galloping toward them reached her ears, and her expression turned pale. They are coming. What should we do? Liera whispered, her eyes wide with panic. Ren's expression darkened. He tugged at the reins, urging his horse to move faster. Don't look back. Keep moving. Liera had only learned to ride horses in less than 2 days, after theoretical teaching from Rowan, so she found it difficult to move. Ren didn't move ahead. Instead, he helped her by dragging the reins and forcing her horse to ride after his. The sound of horses galloping towards them grew louder and louder by the second. Even though Rowan tried his hardest not to panic, his heartbeat raced. Luckily, he had secured his wife and daughter beforehand, sending them away to a nearby village where his wife came from. Now, he just had to save Liera and her people. Even if he died after that, without seeing his family again, he would be able to rest in peace. Over there, as they rode, they heard a loud shout and looked back. A group of soldiers was heading towards them. Though they were still far away, with the speed of their horses, they would most likely catch up in no time. Liera's panic grew. There was no way out. Run! Stop right now! The soldiers barked, but Ren ignored them and continued moving. If he stopped, he might not die, but he couldn't say the same for Liera. Those guards would kill her. Gritting his teeth, he urged his horse to move faster, dragging hers along. Liera was already deep in panic, seeing no way out of their current situation. She believed that if caught, Lord Fagin wouldn't spare her by merely sending her to prison. He might execute her immediately. The soldiers raced towards them on war horses, horses trained for battle and nearly twice as fast as regular horses. Ren has failed to listen to our calls. We have no choice but to kill him, and do not let the Winter Seed girl live. The soldier leading the rest said coldly. The others nodded. They drew their swords and spurred their horses on even faster. The war horses let out ready battle cries, accelerating rapidly. They were only a few meters away, ready to slaughter the pair, when suddenly the atmosphere shifted. The war horses halted abruptly, causing some of the soldiers to lose control and crash to the ground. What is happening? The leader shouted, tugging at his horse to move faster, but the horse refused. Instead, it let out a protesting neigh and threw him off. The other soldiers faced the same fate, their horses refusing to obey and tossing them aside. But Liera's and Ren's horses continued galloping forward without the strange pause. Ren noticed the commotion and slowed down to observe, wondering why the soldiers' horses were behaving so strangely. What is happening to the horses? They were fed enough to last 2 days without food. So why are they reacting this way? The soldiers asked, frowning as they stood, dusting themselves off and grabbing their swords. The war horses remained immobile, their eyes fixed ahead. The soldiers were confused. They had never seen such strange behavior from their horses before. This shouldn't stop our pursuit. Go after them. I'll try to settle the issue with the horses, the leader ordered, noticing that Ren's horse had slowed down. He mistakenly thought Ren's horse had grown tired and could be easily caught now. The soldiers nodded and immediately started their pursuit on foot. Let's go, Ren, Liera urged with fear in her voice, but Ren had already started moving the horse again. Stop right now, Ren, or else we'll kill you, the soldiers barked, their feet stomping the ground as they ran towards him, swords gleaming in hand, ready to strike. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted again. The air became chilly, and the wind howled fiercely, growing chaotic. The soldiers hesitated, confused by the sudden change, but before they could react, they found themselves being lifted into the air, spinning uncontrollably in circles. What? What is happening? I'm flying. My eyes, they yelled in confusion. Even Ren and Liera stopped, looking back to see what was happening. They were stunned to see 19 men being tossed around by a violent, chaotic whirlwind. Their mouths dropped, and their eyes widened in shock at the sight. The leader was equally shocked. What is going on? First, the horses, and now this strange whirlwind. Are the gods punishing us for our actions? He muttered in fear, stepping back cautiously, scared the wind would come for him next. Before he could move away from the area out of fear, a voice sounded behind him, freezing him in place. He instinctively swung his sword, but it was caught mid-air by something strong and unyielding. When he turned around, he was greeted by a charming smile from a tall, white-haired man. His eyes widened instantly as he asked, "Who are you?" DeAndre looked at him with an amused grin and replied sarcastically, "I'm Batman." Huh. The leader stammered, unable to fully process what was happening before suddenly feeling his body levitating off the ground. Before he knew it, he was hurled toward the chaotic whirlwind, joining his men in the storm. Some had already lost consciousness from the violent tossing. DeAndre watched the storm for a few seconds with an amused expression before sighing as he heard the system's notification. 30 million evolution points has been deducted from your account for breaking Rule 007 and helping SSS-rank territory, Winter Seed. Your skills, Wind Magic, Mana Absorption, have been D-ranked to C-rank. This fine is too much, he complained inwardly. This was the first time he had broken this restriction, and the fine was simply outrageous. He wondered how much would have been deducted if he had helped an A-rank territory. But he didn't think too much about it, as he would most likely earn them back in the merchant tournament. DeAndre looked ahead of the hurricane, where a beautiful lady and a middle-aged man were looking at him with awe. That is the sister Alara talked about. She's just as beautiful as Alara, but younger. Sadly, I prefer MILFs, DeAndre sighed as he began strolling toward them. Rowan grabbed the reins of Liera's horse, fearing the figure casually strolling toward them, while Liera shivered uncontrollably. Today had been a really bad day for her. "Who are you?" "Don't come any closer," Rin said. "Who are you, old man?" DeAndre shot a glare at Rin. "Oh, old man." Rin wanted to refute, but he kept silent. DeAndre closed the distance between them. Behind him, the hurricane was still tossing the soldiers around, and most of them had already lost their lives by now. "You must be Liera," he said after reaching them. Liera looked at him, confused. "You don't have to worry. I'm not here to hurt you, but to save you." DeAndre flashed her a charming smile. "Why?" Liera couldn't help but ask. It was already confusing. Why would a strange, angelic person come to save her? "I saw a beautiful lady in distress and decided to help." "Is that bad?" DeAndre asked, but Liera only looked at him without replying. Seeing that she wasn't falling for his sophisticated charm, he sighed and said, "You should return to Winter Seed as soon as you can. Alara and the rest of your friends are worried sick about you." "Alara?" Liera's eyes widened. But DeAndre had already disappeared before she could finish her sentence. Rin looked at the spot where DeAndre had just vanished, and his expression brightened. "Your sisters are alive. We should leave now." He grabbed her reins, and both of them began their journey. Meanwhile, the hurricane ended, and the corpses of the soldiers fell to the ground. None of them survived. At the northern border of Winter Seed, the small battle was already on the verge of ending. The soldiers of Glenwood had already been taken down, their corpses sprawled across the border, blood dripping from them. But the clanging of swords still continued as Rowan and Stannis engaged in intense combat. Nevertheless, unlike in the beginning when Stannis had the upper hand, Rowan had the upper hand now. "What?" Stannis' voice cracked in disbelief. Just a few minutes ago, Rowan couldn't block his half-assed attack without taking several steps backward to maintain balance. But now, even his all-out attacks seemed to be nothing before him. In fact, it looked like Rowan wasn't taking him seriously anymore. How'd he suddenly get stronger? Stannis wondered as he focused all his attention on defending. "If it continues this way, I will surely die," he yelled inwardly. He struggled to sneak a look at his soldiers that he had ignored since the beginning of the battle, but was shocked to see all of them lying dead on the ground. He was even more surprised when he saw that none of Winter Seed soldiers was on the ground. "This can't be. That bastard told me they were nothing compared to my soldiers." Was he lying all along? Was he plotting everything to his advantage? His mind wandered. Gritting his teeth, he pushed back with all his strength and tried to create a gap between himself and Rowan before launching an all-out attack. "You think that would work?" Rowan's taunting voice reached his ear. Stannis didn't reply and glared at him, but Rowan looked really composed. He kept walking closer towards Stannis, who took several steps back in fear while lifting his sword in a defensive position. If I were you, I would surrender, Rowan continued taunting him. Surrender? Never. Stannis let out. Do you still think you stand a chance? Even if you manage to kill me, do you think you will be able to escape the hands of my soldiers? There are more than 100 of them, and only one of you. So think carefully, Rowan continued taunting him. Rowan had decided against killing him instantly, as he needed more info on Glenwood. He believed in the strength of his men, but at the same time, he couldn't overlook the fact that Glenwood had more than 6 times his army. Meanwhile, Stannis considered his options. He is correct. I can't win against him or his soldiers, and I can't die without completing my goal. What if I use his men to take over Glenwood? Then I can kill him later for the death of my men. Stannis' mind immediately came up with a plan. Fine, he let out in defeat, tossing his sword to the ground and lifting his hands in surrender. I will help you wage a good war against my village as long as you promise not to kill me, he offered. The captains and soldiers exchanged looks before turning to Rowan with varying emotions on their faces. Lord Rowan, we can't trust this guy. Bryce immediately reacted with a furious expression on his face as he looked at Stannis. I agree. He might betray us when he gets the chance. We can't risk that at this moment. Rowan let out as well. The other soldiers chattered about their agreements too. Damn it, these geezers are going to ruin my plan if this goes on. Stannis was worried. He turned to look at Rowan to see what he had to say. Based on the information he had, Rowan was naive and weak. He believed Rowan would make the wrong choice by believing him. On the other hand, Rowan let out a sigh and withdrew his sword. He signaled to the soldiers behind Stannis, and they immediately ran to restrain him. We need all the information you can give. If you tell a lie, I will know, and you'll be killed immediately, he let out in an authoritative tone. The soldiers reacted equally. None of them agreed with his decision, but they had no choice but to accept it. Stannis grinned inwardly. He is just as naive as they said. I will give you all the information I have and help you win, he agreed. Rowan only shook his head. Time was running out, and he didn't have time to waste here. He signaled for the soldiers to force Stannis onto his knees and tie his hands. Stannis wanted to refute getting tied up, but then Bryce stepped forward and slapped him across the face. With bitterness and helplessness, he let himself get restrained. After he was restrained, Rowan asked them to bring the overly pummeled Oliver and the handless Judus to the same spot, and they did. Oliver's face at this moment was unrecognizable, swollen, and bleeding all over his body. Even his crotch area was bleeding profusely. Oliver, Judus. Stannis was shocked to see both of them in that state. Oliver's eyes were swollen, so he couldn't see clearly when he arrived. However, hearing Stannis' voice, he forced his eyes open and they widened. Why was the great Stannis sitting on the ground? The great swordsman who could wipe out 100 soldiers, kneeling before a naive lord? How could that be possible? His mind ran amok. Rowan smirked as he observed their expressions. Oliver was confused and frustrated that his hope had shattered, and Stannis was devastated because he knew his plot was bound to fail at this point. Oliver, you said this guy could deal with all our soldiers, right? Rowan asked mockingly. Oliver's head was bowed to the ground, and he couldn't reply. The man who is supposed to save your life is now living solely on my mercy. What can you say about your previous boasts now? He continued taunting him. His every word was like a bullet that shot deep into Oliver's head. Even Judus was embarrassed and ashamed on his dad's behalf. Now, I'm going to ask both of you questions, and you better answer me truthfully, or else one of your limbs is coming off. Rowan threatened and brought out his black dagger. Oliver and Judus were traumatized at the sight of the black dagger. Judus began shivering and tried his best to crawl back, but there was no way as he was handless. I will start by asking you two some simple questions, and if you are bold, lie to me. Rowan smirked. He started with Stannis, asking him a few questions, starting with simple ones and moving to tedious and more personal questions. With God eyes, Rowan could observe the changes in his emotions, and he could tell when he lied. Stannis tried to answer all his questions as sincerely as he could, but then Rowan asked a question that he wanted to deny with all his strength. Have you ever tried to force your way with Alara and Liera before? Rowan asked. Stannis' eyes widened at once. How did he know? Meanwhile, the young soldiers began to discuss among themselves. They talked about Alara and Liera, how they were very beautiful, and what they would do to Stannis personally if it were true that he had forced his way with them. Hearing their reactions, Stannis had no choice but to deny. Of course not. Why would I do that? I could do anything with any woman of my choice in Glenwood. Besides, they're with Lord Fagin, he answered immediately, trying his best to sound as truthful as he could while looking at Rowan. The captains and soldiers believed immediately. His voice and reaction were too genuine to be false. You lied, Rowan grinned, and his dagger moved following his words. It was the... Stannis tried to lie even more, but he couldn't finish his statement when his left hand went off. Ah! Stannis cried out in pain. I warned you not to lie to me, but you did. Stannis kept crying as he stared at his hands. You were lucky I sliced your left hand instead. I know how important your right hand is to you as a swordsman, Rowan continued. Now I want you to divulge everything. And remember, one more lie and you'll be handless forever, he concluded. With tears dripping from his eyes, Stannis divulged all the information he had. With the new information, Rowan didn't waste any time and gathered his men. He brought out the weapons he had purchased from DeAndre and distributed them to the soldiers. He only shared the swords and armors, as those were the most important weapons for the current situation and the only ones the soldiers had experience with. Rowan called for Riella, Brandon, and the two middle-aged cooks who used to cook for him before Riella took their place. He then brought out enough food supplies for 1 week and left them under their care. Before Rowan departed, he shared a brief, pleasant moment with Riella and assured her of his pending victory. With food distribution settled, Rowan went to the soldiers and selected 400 men. The other 100 stayed behind in Winterseed to guard the village in case of rare monster attacks. As he marched out with the 400 soldiers, the people of Winterseed gathered around the southern border, cheering for them while some blessed and prayed for their success. This earned Rowan a few points. The young soldiers felt emotional, seeing the villagers' reactions, especially the young, beautiful maidens with their bouncing chests who waved cheerfully. Witnessing the bouncy creations of God, their motivation soared, and they all swore to return alive. Just like that, the final preparations for the first battle under the reign of Rowan Winterseed, the first ended, and the soldiers stepped out to conquer. Rowan and his soldiers could be seen marching through the forest path leading down to Glenwood. The path was mostly wide but narrowed in certain spots, with thick bushes and tall canopy trees lining both sides. The thick bushes and tall canopy trees formed a natural fence, almost like walls closing in around them as they made their way through the forest. The sound of insects chirping and birds singing ceased, covering the area with only the sound of their heroic marching. Rowan and the captains could be seen riding their horses in front, while the soldiers marched uniformly behind them with battle-ready seriousness etched on their faces. At the last row, 2 young soldiers could be seen dragging Stannis along the ground. Stannis was already unconscious at this point, having been dragged on the harsh ground for more than an hour. Rowan wanted to leave Stannis under the control of Brandon as they left for war and deal with him later alongside Oliver when he returned, but the young soldiers refused. They were all very pissed after hearing that Stannis had the balls to force himself on their beautiful sisters. So, Rowan decided to leave him in their care. They could do anything they wanted as long as he was still alive when they got to Glenwood. Riding in front of the others, Rowan was greeted with a lot of notifications. Your villager wishes you a great victory. 100 of your villagers gather together and pray for your safe return. Your lover prays for your return. All the notifications informed him about the current emotional state of his villagers. The last one made him smile, as he knew it was about Riella. As they continued to march forward, Rowan decided to interact with the system. Without hesitating, he called out his character status. Rank, FF rank. Title, Village Head. Territory, FF rank, Winterseed Village. Area, 20 square kilometers. Population, 3,000 plus. Resources, click to view all. Rowan Winterseed. Age, 18. Health, 100%. Power, FF rank. Evolution point, 27,500,000. Skills SS rank 100x reward. SS rank copy. SS rank eyes of revelation. SS rank merge. SS rank beast taming. S rank super voice. C rank sword grandmaster. F rank resistance. F rank muscle strengthening. FF rank night vision. Rowan's stats were much better than the last time he viewed them. Although his power hadn't increased because he chose not to raise it, the amount of evolution points and the number of skills he possessed had grown. The amount of resources he possessed had grown as well after purchasing a few from DeAndre. Recalling the last interaction with DeAndre, Rowan couldn't help but pray for his safety. If anything should happen to DeAndre, he would lose a really important asset for territory development. Lord Rowan, you look really tense right now. Is it because this is your first war? Roland asked from beside him. Rowan turned to him and shook his head. None of them could see his system, so they immediately assumed he was deep in thought as he stared at empty midair. Roland nodded his head and continued. We are getting close to the location we decided on. I know, Rowan answered swiftly. He turned to look at his back and saw the soldiers marching valiantly and fearlessly. Stannis was still being dragged on the ground and was already unconscious. He returned his gaze to the front and pulled the rein, causing the horse to move faster. After about 3 hours of marching through the forest, they finally arrived at their agreed point. It was already the mid-hours of the afternoon, and the fiery sun had already taken its place in the sky, blasting the earth with its scorching heat. Rowan, riding in front, lifted his right hand, and everyone came to a quick halt. This is our major start point, everyone, Rowan began. The soldiers nodded their heads with fearlessness and readiness in their gazes. Seeing the readiness, Rowan smiled and proceeded. He ordered the captains to take 50 men each and march through the forest. This way, Rowan would be left to lead 200 soldiers. This was simply his plan to create an illusion in the eyes of Glenwood's army. Rowan further discussed instructions with the captains and then proceeded to give his usual speech with the amplification of super voice to boost their motivation. Nevertheless, as he discussed with them, his eyes caught 2 figures on horses riding towards them. He halted his speech and rode his horse forward. The captains quickly rode and formed a defensive position around him, staring at the figures arriving in front of them. The horses were still afar, but they didn't let their guard down. Lord Rowan, let me kill them if they try to do anything careless. Bryce dragged out his sword and said to Rowan in his usual furious tone. Rowan nodded. He had already obtained all the information he needed, so there was no need to keep any of Glenwood's people alive. With Rowan's permission, Bryce gritted his teeth, and his grip on his sword grew tighter. He was ready to engage in battle. Nevertheless, as the horses rode closer towards them, the faces of a middle-aged man and a young lady appeared in their vision. Liera, Rowan muttered to himself as he quickly realized who the girl was. She was the same one Alara had been talking about, the one who sacrificed herself for the safe escape of her sisters. As for the man beside her, Rowan hadn't seen him before. A frown appeared on his face as he immediately assumed he was abducting her. While Rowan grasped the identity of the young lady, the soldiers did the same. Their eyes widened in shock and happiness at the sight of her face. However, a deep scowl appeared when they gazed upon Rowan. Look, it's Liera. Liera. I never thought I would see her again, but who is that sick fuck riding with her? Damn, if it's another one like that bastard Stannis, I'll burst his balls myself. Hey, calm down, you've already crushed 2 balls today. The soldiers discussed amongst themselves. Meanwhile, at the front, Bruce had an emotional breakdown as he saw Liera riding towards them. Sister-in-law, he called out in a low tone. Rowan looked at Bruce, a middle-aged man with an insanely huge physique, staring at Liera with a look akin to someone on the verge of tears. Only then did Rowan realize Bruce was actually married to her elder sister. But he didn't focus too much on the realization. They still had to be careful about the man she was with. Rin and Liera had already spotted the soldiers from afar. At first, they couldn't recognize anyone as they were still far apart. But even so, they kept riding. As long as it wasn't Glenwood's army, they knew they were safe. As they rode closer, Liera recognized Bruce's face, and her eyes lit up. "They're from Winterseed. They're my people. We're safe," she said cheerfully. Hearing her response, Ren felt both excitement and shock. He was excited that Winterseed was already preparing for war, but shocked at how quickly they were moving. They were supposed to be unaware, he thought inwardly. Alara and the others shouldn't have reached the village by now, even if they used horses. Plus, Stannis and his men were sent to capture them, making it almost impossible to reach the village and inform them in time. Also, according to the information they received from Oliver, Winterseed had planned to attack when the soldiers came to collect their weekly harvest from the villagers. This meant they weren't supposed to be attacking today at all. But now, Winterseed's soldiers were marching toward Glenwood, which meant they had already been informed. How could that be? Ren had many questions on his mind, but he kept moving forward. He looked at the soldiers and could feel their heated gazes on him, making him realize his precarious situation. "My name is Run, and I am not your enemy." Ren's voice echoed through the forest, causing the soldiers to stiffen, their hands tightening around their weapons. Rowan watched closely, his eyes narrowing as he gauged Ren's sincerity. He activated his inspection skill to quickly observe his stats. From what the status revealed, Ren held no hostility toward them. Still, Rowan couldn't judge his character based solely on his stats. Meanwhile, Liera's eyes darted from the soldier's cautious stares to Bruce, her expression softening as she laid her eyes on him. Without hesitation, she slid off her horse and ran toward him, her face glowing with joy and remorse. Bruce also jumped down from his horse, running toward her with tears streaming from his eyes. As they neared each other, the tension of the moment melted away. Liera threw her arms around Bruce, and tears of joy began to drip from her eyes. Both of them hugged each other tightly. They looked more like father and daughter. While the two of them embraced, the young soldiers advanced toward Run with hateful glares on their faces. Despite his claim that he wasn't an enemy, about 5 minutes had passed since Run and Liera arrived. Most of that time, Liera spent with Bruce, crying her heart out in his embrace. It was a great relief that she was finally out of Glenwood's torturous hands and now in the arms of her loved ones. On the other hand, Ren was being restrained by the soldiers, who gave him heated glares. Ren tried reasoning with them, but they paid deaf ears. Having been betrayed by one of their trusted captain and colleague, trusting others became difficult for them. Far away from the commotion, Rowan sat on his horse and observed the entire scene with a calm expression on his face. He patiently waited for Liera and Bruce to finish their emotional moment before taking any action. Another 2 minutes passed, and Liera finally let go of Bruce and turned to look at Rowan. When she arrived with Ren, the only person she had recognized besides Bruce was Rowan, but she hadn't paid much attention to him. Now, however, as she looked at him, she couldn't help but be dumbfounded by how much he'd changed. The Rowan of 6 years ago always had a shy and inexperienced look on his face, but the Rowan staring at her right now was the total and positive opposite. "Lord Rowan," she muttered in a low voice. "Liera, it is good to have you back," Rowan responded with a smile. But he didn't have enough time for formalities. His expression turned serious at once as he turned to point at Rowan and asked, "Who is he?" Hearing his question, Liera quickly realized that she had forgotten about her only helper. When she saw the soldiers holding him down, she immediately rushed to their side to free him. The soldiers let her do what she pleased, but they were confused as to why she was rescuing him. Wasn't he trying to abduct her earlier? They asked themselves. After getting freed from the brutal hands of the soldiers, Ren dusted himself and bowed his head deeply before Rowan. "I am sorry for failing to greet you earlier. My name is Run. I was an advisor to Lord Fagin of Glenwood before betraying him by freeing Liera. I am not your enemy," he said. Rowan looked at him with squinted eyes as he spoke. Then he turned to Liera and gave her a questioning gaze. "He is telling the truth. After Alara and the others left Glenwood, I was locked in a cell to die of starvation. Ren was the only one who fed me and aided my escape, even endangering his life and the life of his family in the process," Liera explained. The soldiers who manhandled Ren earlier felt apologetic after hearing Liera's explanation. After explaining, Both Liera and Run looked at Rowan, anticipating his next action. Rowan sighed and thanked him. "Thank you for rescuing Liera, Run." Then he followed up with a quick question, "But if I may ask, why did you let go of your good life in a powerful village such as Glenwood and decide to help a girl from a weak backwater village?" Rowan had thought about this after hearing Liera's explanation. If he was an advisor of Glenwood's lord, then his life in the village was definitely good. But why would he take such a foolish risk by saving Liera? Although he appreciated his kindness, he couldn't help but wonder the reason for his decision. "I'm a righteous man, and no matter where I find myself, I try to do the right thing. When I saw that she needed help, as a father with daughters her age, I couldn't let go without helping her," Rin stated with a smile. "That is great, but that still doesn't explain your reason for escaping with her. Risking your life just to uphold your righteousness is unreasonable. There must be a deeper intention behind your actions." Rowan followed up without backing down. His questions were so well thought out that even Run, who was an advisor known for his wisdom, couldn't help but admire him. He couldn't help but wonder why the spy told him Rowan was naive and inexperienced. Nevertheless, he didn't keep Rowan waiting and gave his answers, stating his reasons for taking such a bold and risky step. He told Rowan how he tried to warn Lord Fagin against his actions, but Fagin never listened and always put the life of the villagers at risk. "I don't want myself and my family to die because we are on the wrong side, so I picked your side. I believe you're going to win this war because you are in the right. Before, that was just a speculation in my heart, but seeing you today, I believe your victory is inevitable," Rin replied. After hearing all his reasons, even Bruce couldn't help but nod his head gently. "Good. Now we're going to get even more authentic information from someone close to the Lord of Glenwood," Rowan rejoiced inwardly. As he was about to engage in a deeper, strategic conversation with Run, Liera suddenly opened up and told him about a mysterious white-haired man who helped both of them, and then asked about the whereabouts of Alara and the others. "A handsome, white-haired man?" Rowan asked with confusion etched on his face. "There is only one person who fits that description." Liera and Rin nodded. "I thought he was going to the merchant tournament immediately. When did he get the chance to save them, and why?" Rowan pondered. "Did he say anything before leaving?" he asked. "Yes, he told me to hurry back to the village and also said that Alara had arrived in the village already." "Is that the truth? Are they okay?" she asked. It was clear that she was worried for her sisters. Rowan immediately cleared her worries and assured her that they were okay and safe. Nevertheless, he couldn't help but curse at DeAndre inwardly. At first, when he heard the description of the mysterious man, how cool and flashy his magic was, and how gentle he was with her, the first person that came to his mind was DeAndre, and his guess was confirmed after he heard what he said to them before leaving. Nevertheless, he didn't dwell on that topic too much. He spoke with Run, inquiring as much information as he could about Glenwood. Rin was pretty honest, revealing everything he knew, starting from the time of the attack and the particular strategy Lord Fagin was going to use. He even tried to suggest a counter-battle formation to conquer Glenwood's army. Rin also went as far as to explain to Rowan how lucky he was that the strongest captain wasn't around. He is the greatest captain and the strongest swordsman in Glenwood, but he was sent away to capture Alara and company. Since he hasn't returned, and you claim they are okay, that means he was either killed on the way by goblins or got lost in the forest. Without him around, your victory would be much easier, he said. "You mean Stannis?" Rowan asked. Rin's eyes widened. "You know him?" "How?" "Well, the bastard was gutsy enough to try and attack my village with his men. His men are probably with the devil in hell right now, but the bastard is still alive," Rowan said. He signaled to the soldiers, and they dragged the ragged body of Stannis toward Rin. When Rin saw the state of Stannis, his jaw almost dropped to the ground. How had the great captain been defeated by Rowan and his men? On the other hand, Liera's eyes grew cold with hatred and anger. Her fists trembled as the sudden urge to run over to him and squeeze the life out of him surged in her mind. "If this guy is your so-called greatest captain and strongest swordsman, then taking down the other captains will be pretty easy," Rowan said with a smirk. But his words fell on deaf ears. Rin's eyes were fixed on Stannis, who was bloodied beyond recognition. His face was swollen, one of his hands missing, his body covered in ghastly wounds, and his cloth armor torn and ragged, making him look like a madman. How many soldiers did it take to bring him down? Rin quickly turned to Rowan and asked with curiosity, "Soldiers? Are you underestimating the power of our Lord?" The soldier holding Stannis said with an annoyed expression on his face, "This guy is not worth half the strength of Lord Rowan. If Lord Rowan wanted, he could have killed him when they fought, but he let him live simply because he had use for him," the soldier bragged with a smug look on his face. The more he spoke about how Rowan took him on alone, the more shocked Rin became. Even Lyanna found it hard to believe. She had been in Glenwood long enough to know that Stannis wasn't a soldier who could be easily defeated, even by 100 soldiers. But Lord Rowan was able to defeat him and make him beg for his life on his knees. How was that possible? How strong had Lord Rowan grown since she left the village? "Lord Rowan, what are you waiting for? March your soldiers toward Glenwood and claim your victory," Rin urged. Rowan smiled. "Haha, then it's settled." He turned to his soldiers and quickly made a few changes to their formation. This time, Rowan sent 300 soldiers with the 4 captains into the forest to form a sneak attack squad, while he led the remaining 100. According to the information from Ren and Lyanna, Glenwood soldiers had already begun marching toward them, and within the next 7 hours, their forces would likely clash. Unfortunately and fortunately, it would be around the mid-hours of the night. It was still the late hours of the afternoon. Glenwood soldiers, under the leadership of their fat lord, could be seen marching towards Winterseed with serious expressions on their faces. The army behind Lord Fagin had more than 3,000 soldiers. 500 soldiers rode on horses, while the others marched. Lord Fagin and his 8 captains rode their horses, staying at the front. They led the soldiers toward Winterseed to conquer it. After killing Lord Rowan, they believed their village would prosper even more. The number of slaves working their farms would increase, the number of usable women would rise, and their village would become more popular among others. With this motivation in mind, they kept marching forward. Lord Fagin, riding ahead, waved his hand, and 2 soldiers quickly ran to him, handing him a big piece of meat that they had prepared beforehand. Fagin took the large piece of meat and devoured it in just 2 big bites. He then let out a satisfied belch and continued riding forward. Some of the soldiers felt disgusted but couldn't voice it. Even the captains were repulsed by his actions. How could their lord be nothing but a fat tyrant who knew nothing of ruling except conquering smaller villages and taking their women? The past lords had been nothing like him. They were all powerful warriors and true leaders. Nevertheless, Fagin was too obsessed with flattening Winterseed and seizing all the beautiful women for himself to notice the feelings of his soldiers. It had been nearly 3 hours since they had marched out of Glenwood. Due to the large number of soldiers, they had only managed to move a short distance away from their village. "Lord Fagin, look over there," one of the captains pointed ahead of them. "What?" Fagin lazily asked, struggling to move his fat head in the direction the captain pointed. The other captains and soldiers riding at the front had already seen the surprising sight, and their faces were filled with shock. Up ahead, several meters away, 15 horses stood in a dazed state. Close to the horses, 15 soldiers were lying on the plain ground, or so it seemed to them. When Fagin saw this, his gaze immediately turned furious. "Those bastards I sent after Lyanna and that traitor Rin are resting instead of doing their jobs," he shouted in anger. The other captains understood his rage. "You and you, go wake them up," Wagga, who was beside Fagin, said to 2 soldiers behind him. The soldiers nodded, pulled the reins of their horses, and rode toward the group of horses and sleeping soldiers. When they arrived, they made their horses stomp on the heads of the men to wake them up. "You lazy bastards! How dare you defy the orders of our great Lord Fagin? Wake up this instant and face his wrath," one of the soldiers berated as he stomped their heads. But there was no response, not even a single movement from the men on the ground. At that moment, the soldier noticed the strange state of their leather armor. It looked as though it had been squeezed by something incredibly strong. Strange, the soldier thought to himself, and he stomped their heads even harder. Still, there was no response. His eyes widened as he realized the truth. He turned to look at Lord Fagin and the soldiers, who were watching him with squinted eyes, and said in a loud voice, "They are dead." Gasps erupted from the soldiers. "What do you mean, dead? I told you to wake them up, and now you're making up lies in front of me? Are you courting death?" Fagin was in disbelief and berated the soldier instead. "I'm not lying." The soldier responded quickly. He dismounted his horse and grabbed the body of one of the soldiers. Lifting the body up, he let go of it, and it slumped back into its original position without a single reaction. He did the same with the others, and only then did the shocking realization sink in. Fagin's reaction was, as expected, overly dramatic. He ordered the captains to inspect the corpses themselves. When the captains returned, their reports shocked him. "What do you mean they died without any wounds?" he demanded, but the soldiers gave no answer. How could they have died without wounds? What had killed them? Why were the horses standing there without any reaction? So many questions filled their minds. "This is the work of Rowan," Fagin finally concluded. "That traitor knows how to use herbs to heal, which means he also knows how to use them to kill. He poisoned them," he continued angrily. His conclusion was quickly accepted by the soldiers. They all knew about Ren's ability to heal with herbs, and they also knew that some herbs could be poisonous, which meant Ren could indeed kill with them. "Damn, he's most likely taking that winter seed winch to her people, and then he'll give them all the information about us. We need to move faster and make sure he doesn't get the chance. Even if he does, the people of Winterseed won't be able to fully prepare before we arrive," he said to the soldiers. "Based on the calculation from my advisors, we should arrive in Winterseed before midday tomorrow if we stop to rest on the way. But why should we rest? Let's keep marching forward," he roused his soldiers. They let out a loud war cry and clanged their weapons together. "We need to reach their village before dawn and attack while they sleep," Fagin declared with a wicked grin. Without further delay, he resumed leading his men toward Winterseed to conquer it. They marched past the corpses of the soldiers on the ground. Some tried to take the horses, but the animals refused to budge. It was as if their bodies were frozen, though strangely, they were still breathing and alive. What could be happening? The soldiers wondered, but they didn't stay to find out and kept marching forward. Nighttime quickly arrived as the army of two villages marched toward each other with different purposes. One wanted to conquer the other to obtain women, while the other wanted to protect his people and improve his territory. Though with different purposes, their goals were similar, which was conquering the opposition. It wasn't the darkest hour of the night yet, as the moon hung up in the sky and provided the earth with its crescent glow, as usual. Unfortunately, as the sky turned dark, so did the expressions of Winterseed's soldiers, as fear quickly gripped their hearts. Roland and a group of 100 young soldiers moved cautiously through the forest. Unlike the clear path cutting through to Glenwood, the path inside the forest was rough, filled with vines and thorns that made moving difficult. Rowan held his sword and chopped down as much vine as he could, while the young soldiers walked behind him. He couldn't help but notice their slowed movements. They had all become inactive, unlike their active selves in the daytime. They no longer chatted amongst themselves, afraid of drawing the attention of monsters. Roland turned to look at the soldiers behind him, who were shivering in fear as they took cautious steps forward. "Walk faster, all of you. You're soldiers. Fear is a natural reaction, but you're not its bitch. Get a hold over fear and make it your bitch. Only then will you become great soldiers." He tried to motivate them. The soldiers nodded their heads, but the fear in their minds remained. They kept thinking of the negative possibilities while neglecting all the positives. This was the work of fear. Their minds only considered the negatives, like, will a monster attack? What if we get attacked by hobgoblins? What if a group of Raytax attacks like the other day? Will they be able to survive? With these negative thoughts running through their minds, they gradually forgot about the freedom and victory awaiting them. Roland could only sigh and continue forward, swinging his sword to clear off the bushes blocking his path while also creating one for the others. Roland was currently leading the first 100 men in front as they took the left side of the forest. Far behind him and his men, Bruce could be seen leading 50 soldiers. On the right side, Bryce and Josh led one group of 50 soldiers. The formation inside the forest was pretty simple. The first group in front had the job of scouting and informing the others of the presence of Glenwood soldiers. Once the Glenwood soldiers arrived, they would send a signal to the group behind them and also to Rowan's group. This was a formation they hadn't experienced before, so it was kind of new. Nevertheless, they trusted in the wisdom of their Lord Rowan. In the clear and wide path, Rowan led his 100 men. Riding beside him were Run and Liera. Since he couldn't send them to Winterseed alone, he decided to bring them to war. When he made the suggestion, he expected Liera to refuse, but shockingly, she agreed. In fact, she was joyous about experiencing the war, excited to see the expressions on the faces of the people who tormented her after losing to Rowan. As Rowan rode forward, his eyes were fixed in front. Thanks to his night vision, he was able to see clearly in the dark. This alone was a major advantage on his side. Nevertheless, the current skill rank wasn't good enough, as it could only cover a short distance, so Rowan decided to upgrade it. He called out his system and began upgrading the skill, spending 500,000 evolution points in the process. Skill FF-rank Night Vision has been upgraded to B-rank Night Vision. A new effect has been added. Night Vision, B passive skill granting clear daylight vision at night. Effect, attack perception plus 50%. Rowan couldn't help but smile, seeing the new effect of the skill. He didn't waste time and immediately tested the improvement in his night vision, and the result was amazing. The distance he could see clearly had increased, and his vision became as clear as though it were still the bright hours of the morning. With the improved effect of the skill, his advantage grew. Several hours passed, and their journey continued. It was already the mid and darkest hours of the night. The sound of owls and other nocturnal creatures could be heard across the forest. Aside from the sounds of the nocturnal creatures, the forest was mostly quiet during these hours, except for the current sounds of soldiers marching. Rowan's eyes squinted as he heard the noise of the Glenwood army arriving. It is about to begin, Rowan thought with a sigh. He turned to his back and gave a nod to his soldiers, causing them to halt in their steps. Immediately as they halted, the sound of the Glenwood soldiers approaching became even louder. The chattering of the soldiers, the neighs and galloping of the numerous horses all became clearer at that moment. However, they still hadn't seen each other because of the curve in the path ahead, which blocked their view. After a few minutes, the fiery glows from the torches began to illuminate the curved path, signifying the closeness of the Glenwood army. The soldiers' hands clenched tightly around their swords, their eyes brightened with battle readiness, and their minds sharpened. Liera and Ren tightened their grips on their horses' reins. The battle they had been anticipating was about to begin. In this battle, the victor and the loser would be decided, the conqueror and the conquered would emerge, and the dynamics of the two villages would drastically change, no matter the outcome. Rowan turned to his left. With his improved night vision, he could see Bruce and his soldiers moving forward and taking formation. He turned to his right and saw that Bryce and Josh had already taken their positions as well. A smirk crept onto his face, and he returned his gaze to the front. The Glenwood army was now appearing out of the curved path blocking them. The soldiers riding in front held torches that lit up their paths. Riding among the soldiers was a fatso whom Rowan recognized simply with his size. As Glenwood soldiers stepped out more, they came to a halt as they set eyes on the small army standing on their path, shocked expressions appearing on their faces. Glenwood's strategy for the battle was straightforward. They planned to reach Winterseed as quickly as possible and launch a surprise attack when it was least expected. By doing so, they would avoid casualties on their side and reduce the overall effort needed to secure victory. With this strategy in place, victory was just a single step ahead. However, what they never considered while making this plan was, what if Winterseed was prepared? Thus, when they saw the army stationed far away, their expressions crumbled in shock. Captain Waga and the other captains were the first to spot the soldiers, as they were looking ahead cautiously, unlike Lord Fagin, who was busy devouring a large piece of meat while riding alongside. At first, they thought it was just their imagination, as they never expected an army to be stationed in the middle of the forest. But as they looked closer, and with the help of the dim moonlight, they realized it wasn't an illusion. It was real. What? Why are they here? Waga was the first to react. Didn't that bastard spy say they wouldn't take any action until the day after tomorrow? Another captain asked in disbelief. Does this mean he's been betraying us all this time, feeding us false information? A third captain speculated. Only after the captains began discussing the situation did Fagin understand what was happening. Tearing his focus from a meat, he looked ahead and saw a small army stationed there. Even though it was 30 times smaller than his own, it still took him by surprise. His expression crumbled instantly, and he cursed. That bastard had been lying to us all along. Turning to Waga, he added, "Make sure to catch that guy and bring him to me. I'll kill him myself to teach him a lesson." While Glenwood's soldiers reacted, Rowan smirked and signaled his men to get ready. Then he pulled the reins and rode his horse forward towards Glenwood army, fearlessly. Glenwood's soldiers barely reacted, even as they saw Rowan riding toward them. They didn't see him as a threat, but rather as prey they could easily defeat. Fagin watched Rowan's approach with disgust. "You're just as fat as the descriptions," Rowan mocked as he neared. "You!" Fagin's bulky frame flinched with rage. But Rowan ignored his reaction and continued moving closer. "You and your people should be ashamed for taking control of a small, defenseless village just because their lord was ill," Rowan continued, berating them without restraint. He took every opportunity to mock Fagin's obesity and ridicule their cowardice and foolishness, saying everything he knew would get under their skin. Waga and the other captains argued back, laughing at Rowan's physique, mocking his village, and even ridiculing his father for being an irresponsible man who abandoned his duties, leaving them in the hands of a weak son. Their verbal exchange lasted for about 2 minutes. At this point, Rowan was only a few meters away, standing face to face with Fagin, completely fearless. Fagin scoffed. "You talk a lot for a naive fool who doesn't even have full control over his village." "I think you meant control over your village," Rowan smirked, then continued. "If your village is as strong as you claim, how did 5 innocent and weak women escape? How did your strongest captain, Stannis, lose to me? And why doesn't even your advisor believe in you?" Rowan dropped bomb after bomb. In battle, one underhanded technique is to erode the opponent's confidence, shattering their morale and making them lose hope. This forces them to make reckless, unplanned decisions, inevitably leading to a humiliating defeat. This was Rowan's plan exactly, and, as expected, his words had a powerful effect. Through his night vision, Rowan saw the disbelief on the faces of Glenwood's soldiers when they heard that Stannis had been defeated. It was clear that their faith had been in him. As for Fagin, his face twisted in rage as he barked loudly. "So, Ren's with you, huh? I knew it. That bastard. After I'm done killing you and your men, I'll deal with him personally. And as for those women, I'll drag them back and make them suffer like never before." Ren and Liera heard his words, but it only deepened their hatred and anger. They silently prayed for Fagin's swift and painful demise. Meanwhile, Glenwood's soldiers grew enraged over Fagin's threats against their beloved sisters. Bruce gritted his teeth, vowing to cut off Fagin's tongue for his vile words. As for Rowan, he laughed mockingly and fired back with a sharp retort. "You're going to punish my women with that tiny little thing of yours? I heard it's about as small as a 2-year-old's. Fagin immediately flushed with shame, his face reddening in embarrassment. Some of the captains beside him struggled to keep straight faces after hearing Rowan's brutal jab. As Fagin's anger continued to grow, a quest was triggered. Quest. Briefing. The Lord of Glenwood harbors a deep hatred for you and your people. With his army, he plans to overrun your territory and burn it to the ground. Objective 1. Defeat the Glenwood army with fewer than 10% casualties on your side. Objective 2. Take down 3 out of 8 of Glenwood's captains. Objective 3. Take the head of Glenwood's lord. Rewards. X1 Common Grade Territory Box. X1 Wheel Ticket. Unlock Wheel Feature. 1 million evolution points. Rowan smirked and turned his gaze toward Fagin. Fagin was already fuming. His soldiers had drawn their swords, ready for battle. The captains lifted their hands, ready to signal any second. Since you love to run your mouth, I'll save you for last. I'll let my army slaughter your little group first, and then we'll see if you can keep talking. Fagin grinned. He nodded at Waga. Waga quickly signaled the other captains, who in turn signaled their soldiers. The sound of swords being unsheathed filled the air, spreading across the forest in the dead of night. Rowan lifted his hand to signal his own soldiers, his eyes still locked on Fagin. Let's have a fair fight, he said coldly. He then rode back to his troops, who were ready for battle. Draw your swords, men of Winter Seed. Now is the time to prove yourselves worthy. The time to show your strength and make your ancestors proud. The more Rowan spoke, the more his soldiers' confidence surged. Notifications of their rising morale popped up with each word. Winter Seed's soldiers gripped their swords tightly and took battle-ready stances. As they steadied themselves, thoughts of their families and loved ones filled their hearts. As the faces of those loved ones appeared in their heart, a supernatural boost in confidence and motivation appeared in their hearts. The strength to protect those loved ones appeared as well. The atmosphere turned deadly serious in an instant. The captains and soldiers hidden from Glenwood's view also braced themselves for the coming battle. Bryce and the other captains ensured their soldiers were ready while paying attention to the brewing chaos about to erupt. As both sides prepared, Rowan and Fagin locked eyes with each other with menacing gazes. One was smug and the other bright with schemes. With a loud voice, they let out in unison. Engage! Engage! Fagin and Rowan yelled out in unison. Following their collective battle cries, the soldiers from both sides began moving toward each other bravely, ready to tear one another apart to ensure their victory. Fagin stayed behind while his soldiers launched at Winter Seeds, a confident smirk on his face, one akin to that of a victor. Ren, Liera, and the disfigured Stannis stayed behind as well. On the other hand, Rowan rode in front of his soldiers, sword lifted and eyes fixed on the army, riding toward him. There was no trace of fear in his gaze, only a strong killing intent and brilliantly shining eyes assessing his foes. The soldiers ran beside him with boosted confidence, their eyes set ahead, ready to conquer. However, while the Winter Seed soldiers displayed seriousness and a willingness to win the battle, Glenwood soldiers were the opposite. They had calm and collected expressions, some even chuckling and mocking the small number of soldiers running toward them. Even the number of soldiers on horses was greater than the total number of soldiers running toward them. So, how could they really win? Glenwood soldiers held this belief in their hearts, viewing the soldiers in front of them like ants that could be easily stomped on. Rowan smirked at the unseriousness in their eyes. This was his plan, to create an illusion of victory in their perspective and then reveal his trump card when they least expected it. The distance between the Glenwood army and Winter Seed army shortened drastically, with only a few seconds remaining before they clashed. At that moment, Rowan lifted his hand once again and yelled, "Attack now," in a loud voice. Glenwood soldiers looked at him as though they were looking at a fool as they advanced in his direction. What is this fool doing? Is this guy crazy? How is he even the Lord of Winter Seed? They commented after hearing Rowan call to attack. They wondered why he was asking his men to attack when they were already doing so. Only a madman would do that, they thought. Nevertheless, just seconds after Rowan's shout, loud, rustling noises erupted from the forest, forming a left-right wall around them. At first, it started as a faint noise, like a small animal crawling through the bushes, but then it grew significantly louder. The loud rustling sounds of the thick bushes distracted the soldiers very close to the forest, causing them to fearfully observe their sides. But it was too late. Suddenly, loud battle cries resounded from the bushes, causing a swift disorientation in the hearts of Glenwood soldiers. Lord Fagin, who stayed behind, couldn't help but shiver intensely. His fat figure fell off the horse carrying him. The horse, equally terrified, turned its back and fled. Following the battle cries, Winterseed's soldiers emerged from the bushes one after another. They sprinted toward their opponents with dead serious expressions and began swinging their swords menacingly. Roland and his soldiers were the first to attack, emerging right at the last line of the Glenwood army, very close to Lord Fagin, who was now struggling to lift his body off the ground. "Attack! Do not spare any of them," Roland commanded. The soldiers under him began stabbing the disoriented soldiers marching from the last lines. With determination to free their village and protect their loved ones, they fought valiantly. Bryce, Bruce, and Josh attacked from the other wings as well. Just a few seconds after the appearance of the soldiers from the bushes, the battlefield became chaotic. One after another, Glenwood men fell to the ground with stab and slash wounds on their bodies. The remaining soldiers tried to fight against the new foes, but it was nearly impossible. They were all stationed to attack the army in front of them, unaware of those from the side, making defense nearly impossible. Rowan watched the chaos brewing, and a victorious smirk appeared on his face. He summoned 2 swords from his inventory and motivated the soldiers once more. "This is it. Our victory is right in front of us. Grab it with all your strength. Show no mercy," he yelled. The soldiers behind him let out a loud "Yahhhh" and continued forward, clashing against the front line of soldiers fearlessly. Rowan clashed with a soldier on horseback. As the soldiers struggled to regain composure, Rowan stabbed him in the chest, killing him. Slayed X1 foe, plus 70 evolution points. Ding, 100x rewards activated, 7,000 evolution points. Rowan ignored the reward from killing the soldier and moved on to his next opponent. With both swords tightly clenched, he felled every foe that came his way. The battlefield descended into chaos. Screams and the clash of steel filled the air as Rowan's ambush took full effect. Glenwood soldiers, confident moments earlier, were now panicking. The calm smirks they had worn earlier vanished instantly as Winterseed forces poured out from the forest, attacking with relentless fury. "What the hell?" one of the Glenwood soldiers yelled, his voice trembling with fear. Wagga observed the battlefield with a stunned expression and yelled, "Hold the line! Regroup!" immediately. But the command fell on deaf ears. No one heard or paid attention to his words as they fought for their lives. Winterseed soldiers didn't hold back at all. They used all the anger they had harbored for the past 6 years under the harsh vassal decree by Glenwood to slaughter without consideration. Fagin, still on the ground, no longer held the same confident smirk he had earlier. His hands trembled as he watched his army crumble. "This can't be happening," he muttered, wide-eyed, as he struggled to lift himself from the ground. He would have escaped already, but his horse had already fled the battlefield, leaving him helpless. He could only watch with widened eyes. He saw the men right ahead of him getting slaughtered with no defense from them. He watched as his army crumbled slowly. His people, his dream, his life, they all crumbled as the strength of his army diminished with each passing second. _nighttime, Winterseed Village _ After the exit of Rowan and the gallant men of the village, the villagers gathered outside their homes. The streets of the small village were filled with a large crowd of worried villagers. Children, women, and the elderly all crowded the streets, sacrificing their night's rest to worry and pray for the victory of their beloved lord. The village square was crowded the most, with around 40% of Winterseed's population gathered around that area. A group of women could be seen kneeling on the ground, facing the moon that hung in the sky as though it was some sort of deity. They shut their eyes, and their mouths moved as they whispered words of prayers. Even the little children who had grown accustomed to the hardship inflicted by Glenwood wished hopefully that it would end. And that could only be achieved if their lord won. Normally, the villagers were scared of getting out of their homes in the middle of the night for fear of monster attacks. But today, their fear sank to the back of their minds, and they stepped out. Due to the large number of people outside their homes, the village became rowdy and almost chaotic. At the village square, Riella and Brandon could be seen trying their best to calm the worried hearts of the villagers. Riella approached the younger ladies and little children, cautioning those who caused a nuisance and consoling the worried. Brandon did the same. At a corner of the village square, a middle-aged woman hugging two beautiful young girls around the age of 5 could be seen. Riella, who had just finished speaking with two young ladies, quickly approached them to calm them down. "Mommy, will Daddy come back?" one of the young girls asked her mother. The mother couldn't even respond, as she too was worried. Her younger sister had been taken away by Glenwood 2 years ago, and she couldn't help but be worried for her husband's sake. Riella knelt beside the mother and her daughters, offering a calm smile. She gently stroked one of the girls' hair. "Your daddy is very, very brave and strong. He's with Lord Rowan, fighting for us. He will come back very soon." The mother glanced at Riella, eyes full of worry, just like everyone in the village. Seeing the worried face of a mother, Riella squeezed her shoulder and reassured her. She then played with the little girls a little to calm their little minds. This only took a short story of a strong knight fighting to protect his daughter. After calming them down, she smiled in relief and walked away. As she approached yet another group of grieving villagers, she looked at the sky and closed her eyes for a short minute. "Come back safe, Rowan." It was the middle of the night, and the morning hours were drawing closer. The dark sky had already begun gaining some hints of its usual morning brightness. However, unlike the pending brightness of the sky, a chaotic and dark scene of a bloody battle was taking place below. Men swung their swords with the sole purpose to kill. A few unlucky ones got the receiving end of the sword, while the lucky ones dealt damage. The forest was shrouded in the clanging sound of swords, the cries of soldiers losing or pleading for their lives, and the sound of the victorious letting out a loud chant after slaying their enemies. Roland and Bruce could be seen slashing through Glenwood's army. Roland was badly injured, and his clothes were covered in blood, but he gritted his teeth and kept slashing through the soldiers. The heaven-given strength boost that came with being a father kept him standing. "Slaughter all of them. Spare no one," he called out to his soldiers with gritted teeth. Not too far away from him, the other captains did their job. Bryce was covered in blood as well, but he kept moving while laughing maniacally like a demon. Just his laugh added a layer of fear in the hearts of Glenwood's soldiers. In this battle, Winterseed's soldiers, though small in number, became bloodthirsty demons, while Glenwood became nothing but scared little pussies. About 1 hour had passed since the beginning of the battle, and Glenwood had suffered the most losses. Their corpses lay on the ground in pools of their own blood. Sadly, they weren't the only ones who suffered losses, as some of Winterseed's soldiers also lay on the ground dead. In the middle of this chaotic battlefield was Rowan, standing amidst Glenwood's soldiers, who tried their hardest to focus on him. But fear seized their attention, causing them to lose focus as soldiers attacked from all angles, rendering them useless in the process. Rowan grinned as he twisted his right sword into the heart of the nearest soldier. Another Glenwood soldier tried to attack him, swinging his sword, but Rowan easily predicted the move thanks to his night vision. "Haha, even with my FF-rank power, y'all are still no match for me," Rowan boasted as he pulled his sword from the soldier's chest. The soldier's eyes had already gone blank, his hands weak, and his weapon had dropped from his grasp as he clutched his chest in shock, the fear of death clearly visible. He let out a small, struggling sound as he collapsed to the ground. Rowan felt the usual surge of motivation, but wasn't bothered and proceeded to attack another soldier. His sword drifted venomously through the air and slashed his opponent's neck open, causing blood to spill on Rowan's face. He wiped the blood from his lip and continued pushing through the crowd of soldiers toward their lord, who cowardly remained behind. Thanks to the Lord's fat body, escape was impossible, and Rowan didn't even bother to hurry. After killing the soldiers around him, Rowan swiftly opened his challenge window. Quest. Objective 1. Defeat the Glenwood army with fewer than 10% casualties on your side. Current casualties, 6%. Status, unfinished. Objective 2. Take down 3 out of 8 of Glenwood's captains. Status, completed. Objective 3. Take the head of Glenwood's lord. Status, completed. Seeing the current casualty stats, Rowan's eyes widened in shock and remorse. According to the stats, at least 24 out of the 400 men he brought with him had fallen to Glenwood. Fuck, he cursed, swiftly attacking the soldiers sprinting toward him. None of my soldiers need to die anymore, he muttered to himself. Controlling the battle at this point was almost impossible with his current strength. But there was one option. Rowan's eyes turned cold as he gazed at the large number of Glenwood soldiers still standing. He called out to his system in a low tone, "Evolve power." Ding. Spend 1 million evolution points to evolve? Confirm. Yes/no. Yes. Rowan confirmed without hesitation. As soon as he did, the familiar notification sound echoed in his mind. Almost instantly, a wave of agonizing pain ripped through his body, forcing him to drop his swords. His fingers twitched as the pain overwhelmed him. Rowan crumbled to the ground, gritting his teeth. His body felt numb, his vision fading into darkness. The sounds of swords clashing and men screaming around him dimmed as his hearing weakened. The pain was unbearable. He collapsed his knees, his mind barely registering the ding sounds ringing in his brain. Evolving, 0%. Boosting physical strength, 3%. Boosting physical defense, 8%. Boosting vitality, 20%. Forming evolution core, 27%. Balancing evolution core, 47%. Bryce, fighting nearby, noticed Rowan's condition, and his eyes widened in shock. The manic grin on his face vanished, replaced by sheer panic as he sprinted toward Rowan. "Lord Rowan," he shouted, racing to his side. He quickly reached Rowan, grabbing him before he collapsed further. As he supported him, Bryce could feel Rowan's vitality draining, his strength fading rapidly. "Lord Rowan, what's happening?" Bryce asked frantically, looking into his leader's nearly lifeless eyes. But Rowan didn't answer. He didn't even hear Bryce's desperate question. Nearby, Waga and his men spotted Rowan's weakened state and saw an opening. They charged forward without hesitation, eyes fixed on the vulnerable lord. Seeing them advancing, Bryce gently laid Rowan on the ground, grabbed his sword, and faced the incoming enemies without a trace of fear. "Come at me, cowards," Bryce snarled, his voice thick with anger. Some of the nearby Winter Seed soldiers heard their captain's call and immediately rushed to assist. In moments, 10 men had formed a defensive wall around Rowan, who lay helpless and barely conscious on the ground. "Your lord is down. You bastards will join him soon enough." Waga sneered, laughing coldly. He turned to his men and whispered orders. They split up, attempting to mimic the same strategy Rowan had used against them earlier. "Attack. Protect Lord Rowan with your lives," Bryce commanded before charging directly at Waga. The Winter Seed soldiers responded immediately, forming a tighter defensive circle around Rowan. Their eyes gleamed with determination as they prepared for the oncoming fight. Clang! Waga and Bryce's swords clashed violently. "Where's your confidence now, knowing I'll slay your beloved lord?" Waga taunted as he swung his blade again. Bryce didn't waste words. He parried the attack and quickly launched a counter. But as he swung, a sharp pain shot through his injured arm, causing him to falter. Waga noticed the hesitation, and his confidence surged. "Huh, you're no match for me now." Sensing Bryce's weakness, Waga intensified his attacks, swinging with brutal strength and ferocity. Bryce was forced onto the defensive, struggling to hold his ground. Bryce clenched his teeth as pain flared in his body with each of Waga's strikes. He staggered back, nearly losing his footing more than once. "I have to protect Lord Rowan," he screamed inwardly. "If he fail now, all their efforts would be for nothing. The freedom they had fought so hard for would remain an unreachable dream, and Winterseed would fall to even greater suffering. Meanwhile, Rowan remained motionless and vulnerable on the ground, his body limp. The soldiers forming the defensive circle around him fought fiercely, clashing swords with Glenwood soldiers who saw an opportunity to strike. "You won't touch Lord Rowan unless you go through me," one of the Winterseed men shouted, gritting his teeth as he blocked yet another blow. But the Glenwood soldiers gave them no mercy, launching continuous attacks that allowed no time for recovery. One of the Winterseed men was struck down, falling lifelessly beside Rowan's body. His blood formed a pool beside Rowan. This time, the Glenwood forces had learned to exploit their superior numbers, leaving Winterseed no chance to regain their footing. Not far away, Bryce was forced to one knee, barely managing to lift his sword and block Waga's relentless strikes. The advantage Winterseed once held vanished the moment Rowan fell, leaving them struggling against the brutal. The battlefield was raging with the clanging of swords and cries, carrying emotions ranging from that of death to that of victory. At this moment, the advantage Winterseed once had disappeared as Glenwood forces began to act even more harshly, following the sudden collapse of Rowan in the middle of the battlefield. Prior to Rowan's sudden collapse, Winterseed's men's sole focus was on slaying their foes. Every man fought on his own to slay his enemies, and had no reason to hold back. Nevertheless, following Rowan's fall, they no longer focused on slaying their enemies. Now, they focused on protecting their lord from Glenwood soldiers who tried their hardest to kill him and secure a quick victory. The formation Rowan set for his men was broken the moment he fell to the ground. So was there hope and faith in him. The confidence on the faces of the soldiers who saw him on the ground disappeared, replaced by a strong determination to protect their only hope. Bryce could be seen not too far away from Rowan, kneeling on the ground. His leather armor was torn and blood gushed from the numerous wounds on his body. His face was already bloodied and his eyes were barely open at this moment. Waga stood in front of him with a smirk on his face and mocked him continuously. "Where is your smugness now? I told you to give up, but you never listened. Now all your efforts will go to waste after I chop off the head of your naive lord and secure victory for my people." As the mocking continued, the anger inside Bryce boiled even more. He wanted nothing but to rise up and slit the throat of the bastard in front of him, but he had no strength left, not even enough to lift his body. He could hear the cries of the soldiers behind him as they tried to protect Rowan. "I'm sorry, Lord Rowan, I failed," Bryce thought to himself, his head bowed to the ground in defeat. Meanwhile, Rowan's system was flooded with hellish pain. But the notifications never stopped appearing. Notifications carrying reports of the precarious state of his soldiers. Notifications about their grieving and hopeful emotions, their deaths, and other important details. Notifications about the hopeful prayers of his villagers also rang in his head. Nevertheless, Rowan paid more attention to those involving his evolution. Once his evolution was over, the tide of the battle would turn in their favor. But it seemed fate was against him, making the process overly painful and time-consuming while his men were slaughtered around him. At this moment, the sky had already brightened a little, revealing the arrival of a bright morning, but the bloody battle remained. Men collapsed on the ground, dead, while others lifted their swords in victory, having slain their opponents. Nevertheless, suddenly, from the middle of the battlefield, a strong breeze blasted forth and swept over the battlefield. Dust filled the air, blocking the sight of those near the center. Time seemed to slow down comically as everything began to happen at an incredibly slow pace. The soldiers fighting around Rowan were suddenly blasted away, most of them blinded by the dust that had suddenly appeared unexpectedly out of nowhere. Not too far away, Waga's sword could be seen descending slowly, vertically, as it was about to slice the helpless Bryce in two. Waga had a smug look as he stared down at Bryce, whose head was bowed to the ground in defeat, ready to face death. But then, suddenly, in the span of a split second, a thud sounded from behind Bryce. Bryce didn't think much of the sound as he awaited the swish of Waga's sword ending his life. Seconds passed, but there was no sound of the sword, nor any mocking from Waga. This confused Bryce, as he could hear more bodies falling around him. He struggled to open his eyes, only to behold the sight of a headless Waga still standing in front of him. His eyes widened in terror as he quickly tilted his head to observe his surroundings. He was first greeted with the gust that had gathered, and then his eyes fell on the numerous corpses of Glenwood men within a close radius around him. What happened? He wondered, eyes wide. Waga's headless body was right beside him. Bryce quickly examined it and was shocked to see the clean cut on his neck, meaning an expert had dealt the killing blow. But who could that be? There was no one good enough to swing a sword in such a manner and obtain such results. Not even Stannis, known as the best swordsman, could pull that off. Maybe Lord Rowan could, he thought, but he is unconscious. Bryce quickly turned to look where Rowan had been lying unconscious earlier, but he was shocked to see a dent on the spot instead of Rowan. Both Glenwood and Winterseed men who had fought around him just a minute ago had been blasted far away. As he watched, some of his men coughed and stood up with terrified expressions on their faces. What happened? Bryce questioned immediately. I can't explain. We were fighting just a few seconds ago, and then we were suddenly blasted away. I think something happened to Lord Rowan. One of them explained, his voice revealing just how confused he was at that moment. Bryce tried to understand his soldiers' accounts, but no matter how hard he tried, everything just seemed more bizarre. First, there was a fast-moving figure sprinting through the battlefield, and now their lord was gone. What was happening? He wondered. Demon! Demon! Everyone, run away. The Lord of Winterseed has turned into a demon. Oh no, he is heading this way. Somebody help. Captain Waga has been killed by the demon. All the captains are dead. Everyone retreat. Retreat. As Bryce and his men tried to understand the bizarre situation around them, the terrified cries of Glenwood's men across the battlefield thundered. They turned to observe the chaos and were horrified by the Bryce and the men who protected Rowan earlier watched the new state of the battlefield with shocked expressions on their faces. Their eyes and mouths were wide open as they observed intently. They could see all of Glenwood's soldiers retreating as they cried out in fear. As they ran, they even mentioned the name of Rowan and called him a demon, which made Bryce and his men, as well as every Winterseed soldier, stare in total confusion, wondering if their opponents had suddenly gone crazy. Even the horses had begun to escape the battlefield. Some of Glenwood's men fell on the ground and were trampled upon by their own comrades, and even the horses. Bryce and the others spotted a figure sprinting madly after the retreating soldiers. The figure had the same armor Rowan was wearing before he collapsed, which made their eyes widen. They saw the supposed figure of Rowan suddenly accelerate at an impossible speed as he arrived before the soldiers, who had their backs turned against him. They saw his hand make a swift slash through the air, and more than 3 soldiers collapsed, causing their comrades to cry out in terror and agony. Bryce's eyes widened as he noticed the black dagger in the hands of the menacing figure. It was the exact black dagger Rowan had on him when he punished Oliver and Judus. Everyone, it is Lord Rowan! Bryce yelled, his eyes lighting up. The other men had already noticed by now that the figure wasn't a demon, but rather it was their Lord Rowan. Support Lord Rowan. Let no man escape. Bryce lifted his sword and chanted. The men around and behind him let out a collective battle cry and sprinted forward. The other Winterseed men around the battlefield also joined Rowan in slaughtering their enemies after noticing it was him. The tide of the battlefield once again turned in Winterseed's favor, their vigor and motivation, which had suddenly disappeared due to Rowan's unconscious state, returned, this time manifold. Even Bryce, who was badly wounded, moved his body as fast as he could and chased after the escaping soldiers. Far away from the battlefield, Liera and Run observed everything taking place with puzzled expressions. Due to the distance between them and the battlefield, they were able to observe everything happening. They saw when Rowan fell to the ground, when he suddenly rose up, and even the strong aura that blasted away everyone around him. They even saw him sprinting into action. Having observed everything, Their faces remained dumbfounded, and their mouths and eyes refused to return back to normal. On the other end of the battlefield, Lord Fagin could be seen trying to crawl away. He had been crawling for hours since Winterseed soldiers suddenly popped out of the forest to attack. But now, seeing his men retreating toward his direction, he crawled even more intently. "Why are those lazy bastards retreating?" he cursed inwardly. Even crawling was difficult for him due to his excessive fat figure. He gritted his teeth and pushed himself even more, but the strength in his body was incapable of helping him. "No, I need to escape. If I can get to Glenwood, I can station my remaining soldiers to defend me," he thought with gritted teeth. The stomping sound of his soldiers sprinting fearfully toward him caused his heart to race uncontrollably. He turned to look behind him, and the scene wasn't pleasant at all. It was like watching a pride of lions running hungrily toward him. It was terrifying. At this moment, about 100 soldiers were already close to him. "Stop running and fight. Why are you disgracing Glenwood?" He quickly barked orders at his soldiers, expecting them to understand the situation, grab their weapons, and return to the battlefield. But it was quite the opposite. No one listened to his orders. It was almost as though he was speaking to a bunch of lifeless puppets. Even their gazes didn't seem to hold any respect or reverence for his position. "Are you deaf? Go back and fight. Why are you afraid of a small and weak army like Winterseed?" Fagin kept barking orders, trying to stop his men, but none of them paid attention to his words. No, this can't be happening. How am I the one escaping instead of Winterseed?" he thought. He continued barking orders, even going so far as to threaten to banish all of them if they didn't listen to him. But the words fell on deaf ears. As his men drew closer, he could hear them screaming, "Demon," and he became even more confused. Just then, he spotted a strange figure sprinting amid his men. Nevertheless, unlike his soldiers, this one wore a different uniform and held a strange dagger. As he ran through the soldiers, his hands swiftly moved, and everyone in his path fell to the ground dead. Those nearby made way and sprinted in other directions, some even running into the bushes despite the danger that lurked there. As Fagin looked closer, he recognized the face. It was Rowan. "No, he's coming for my head." As he turned to escape, the men who were closer ran past him, screaming for help. Some of them didn't even acknowledge his presence and stomped on his fat body as they fled. He let out cries and cursed them for their disrespect, but none seemed to be listening at that moment. Fagin could only give up on crawling and turn to face Rowan with terrified eyes. Meanwhile, Rowan, his face cold and expressionless, continued to slay as many soldiers as he could. Slayed X1 foe, plus 30 evolution points. Slayed X1 foe, plus 20 evolution points. Slayed X5 foes, plus 130 evolution points. Achievement: Slay X 500 foes in one day completed. Reward: plus 50,000 evolution points. You have obtained the title Merciless Killer LV1. Special effect of title Merciless Killer has been activated. You have obtained title Merciless Killer LV1. Special effect of title Merciless Killer has been activated. As Rowan slaughtered his way down to the escaping Lord Fagin, several prompts appeared in front of him, revealing his new achievement and title. Rowan paid attention to his notification, as this was his first title. Merciless Killer, a title given to lords who would slaughter to keep their territory and people safe. Effect: Bloodlust Boost LV1. Your bloodlust increases your attack power by 50% during combat. Seeing the effects, Rowan couldn't help but grin as he returned his focus to Lord Fagin. The Glenwood soldiers around him kept moving away from him in fright, as though he were a demon. Nevertheless, this gave Rowan the opportunity to move faster without restraints. Fagin, who had been trying to escape, immediately gave up when he saw Rowan approaching him with unexplainable speed. He stopped crawling and could only watch in fright as Rowan got even closer. He looked at his men for help, but no one seemed to be paying attention to him. He even tried to call for help, promising them luscious rewards, but still, no one listened. They were not ready to lose their lives for a fat bastard who couldn't even lift a sword. The resignation and remorse on his face became clearer. Rowan quickly appeared in front of Fagin and halted, a devilish grin appearing on his face as he stared down at him. Fagin shivered uncontrollably. He tried moving back, but Rowan just kept walking closer, the black dagger in his hand dripping with blood. "You boasted so much earlier, Fagin. But now you're cowering like a little bitch," Rowan mocked. "Where's all that boldness now? That shitty confidence of yours to talk nonsense about my women, where is it now?" He continued, tormenting him verbally. "Please, I was joking." Having no other saving point, Fagin began to plead for his life. "Everything I said was pure lies. I wouldn't dare lay my hands on innocent women." He continued pleading as he stepped back, lifting his right hand to try and stop Rowan. "Oh, are you sure? What about Alara, Liera, and the other women you used to satisfy your non-existing manhood?" Rowan asked. Hearing those names, the look on Fagin's face revealed even more fear. He could still recall those women. He knew very well that Rowan's words were genuine. "I was very wrong. I would never try it again. Please forgive me. If you let me go, I will call off the vassal decree on your village," he pleaded. You think I will really let you live for such a stupid reason, when I can just kill you now and take control over your village?" Rowan snorted. You have killed Fagin already, but he wanted to make him go through the worst emotional pain of his life before killing him, as punishment for the men he had killed and the women he had violated. Rowan made Fagin plead for his life, even making him promise to reverse the vassal decree and become the one Underwinter seed. He even went as far as promising Rowan 90% of their weekly harvest and control over his entire army. Rowan made him list everything he had to give him false hope of survival. Rowan grinned widely as he imagined the look on Fagin's face when his hope was completely shattered. While he tormented Fagin, Bryce, and the other captain slayed as many Glenwood men as they could. Some of the young soldiers who had lost their friends in the battle did not hesitate to slaughter without consideration. The captains who had lost their men also didn't spare their foes. Glenwood soldiers, who were more than 3,000 in number at the beginning, had been badly reduced to less than 1,000, and more kept falling every second. Roland slayed the enemies in front of him before turning to look at Rowan, who stood in front of Fagin. As he saw this, a proud smile crept onto his face. He could see it now. The fate of the village was definitely going to be better. Roland quickly recalled how the village was 2 years ago, when no one had a single hope of escaping Glenwood's strength. But now, it was all going to change for the better. "Do you really want me to spare you?" Rowan asked with a smile on his face. Fagin immediately nodded his head vigorously. "Yes, I want you to spare me. I will do everything it takes, anything." "Are you sure?" Rowan asked. "Yes. Name anything you want me to do or bring for you, and I will fulfill it immediately. I'm telling the truth. How about handing over the staff of authority to me?" Rowan asked with a calm smile. The staff of authority is one of the few things Rowan needed to upgrade his territory. It is the sole and ancestral proof of one's leadership over a territory. The staff of authority is always protected by its owners. Sometimes, even after killing a lord, it will take ages before one finally gets a hold of their staff of authority. Rowan didn't want the stress of having to turn the whole of Glenwood upside down to find the staff of authority, so he made plans to obtain it without hassle. Nevertheless, his question came as a big shock to Fagin. His staff of authority is the only thing protecting his position as Lord of Glenwood. Once it's taken away from him, even the lowest-ranked soldier could kill him and take his position. "My staff of authority?" He repeated the question as though he didn't hear it right the first time. "Did I stutter when I said it the first time?" Rowan asked with a deep frown on his face, his eyes radiating a menacing, killing intent that made Fagin shiver in fear. No, you didn't." Fagin immediately waved his hands in apology. "But," he stuttered afterward, trying to explain the severity of Rowan's request. "But what fat pig? Are you going to sacrifice your staff of authority now and live, or do you want to die?" Rowan lifted his dagger, causing Fagin to shiver in fear. "Okay, I'll give it to you. Please, spare my life," he accepted. Rowan grinned, hearing his response. Without wasting time, he grabbed Fagin by the shirt and forced him off the ground. Thanks to his recent evolution, lifting Fagin, who was almost the same weight as an adult bull, became easy as lifting an infant. After lifting him off the ground, Rowan quickly made a loud, authoritative announcement to every individual on the battlefield, causing both Glenwood soldiers and Winterseed soldiers to stop. If you want to keep your lord alive, drop your weapons and surrender, Rowan announced with a smirk after calling everyone to an abrupt stop. The soldiers of Glenwood stood frozen, terror and confusion etched on their faces as they looked at Rowan. Rowan's strength and the bloodlust radiating from him left them paralyzed, unsure whether to obey his words or make a run for it. Should they trust his words and surrender, or abandon their lord to save their own skins? Rowan watched them closely, reading their fear and doubt. His smirk widened. I know you're all thinking about running away right now, and you might also be wondering, why should I risk my life for this fat fool? But listen carefully. If you try to flee, I'll kill your pathetic lord right here. Then I'll march to Glenwood and slaughter everyone. Old, young, it won't matter. Everyone you care about will die because you disobeyed my orders. If I were you, I wouldn't take such a risk. The more he spoke, the more the fear dug deeper into the hearts of all Glenwood soldiers on sight. Even Bryce and the others were sort of terrified after hearing him speak in such a dark and hostile tone. On the other hand, his terrifying speech did wonders as Glenwood soldiers started dropping their weapons one after the other. They thought about the implications of disobeying Rowan and decided not to take such a risk. Their duty in the first place is to protect their lord and their fellow villagers. What kind of soldiers would they be if they tried to save their heads and leave the rest of their village to damnation? With these thoughts in mind, they didn't dare to disobey the orders of the demon. The clanging sound as their swords were dropped on the ground soon exploded across the battlefield. One after the other, all of Glenwood's soldiers began disarming themselves and getting on their knees afterwards to prove their full surrender. Bryce and the others watched as this took place with surprised expressions on their faces. The scene in front of them was simply amazing and almost impossible to pull off, but their beloved lord was pulling it off with just a simple speech. Even Fagin was puzzled. Just a few minutes ago, he was pleading with his soldiers to rescue him. He even went as far as to make threats and promises, but none of them took his words. But all it took for Rowan to get their full obedience was a threat, and none of them went against his orders. How is this guy naive and dumb? I shouldn't have listened to that bastard, he cried out inwardly. Not too far away from the shocking battlefield, Rin and Liera watched with surprised expressions. The scene both of them had witnessed in the last few hours was nothing but magical. On the other hand, Rowan observed Glenwood soldiers surrendering with a grin on his face. This is it. The joy of controlling even your enemies with fear is heavenly, he thought. After a few minutes, all Glenwood soldiers were now kneeling on the ground without a single intention to escape or attack. They had all given up and succumbed to their fears, becoming nothing but prey under the gaze of the scary demon ahead of them. You all made the right decision, Rowan commented with a grin. Then he turned to his captains and gave them a nod. They immediately understood the message behind his nod and sprang into action without hesitating. Everyone grabbed their weapons. Bryce and Roland ordered their men at once. They all went in the midst of the kneeling Glenwood soldiers and took the weapons in front of them, unarming them and leaving them with no single means of defending themselves. On the other hand, Josh and Bruce gave orders to their men to bind their hands with the rope Rowan had given to them before the battle. Sadly, the amount wasn't enough to bind all of Glenwood's soldiers, so they immediately went to the bushes to grab some fiber plants to use as makeshift ropes to bind the soldiers. Unarming and binding Glenwood soldiers took them more than 30 minutes. After they were done, Rowan began his next line of action. He ordered his men to start moving Glenwood soldiers as they marched forwards towards Glenwood. They immediately carried out their orders. They ordered Glenwood soldiers to make several lines, then began marching them toward the direction of their own territory like slaves. Rin rode towards Rowan as fast as he could and gave him his horse to ride because there were no other horses around except the one Liera rode on. Rowan gave him a nod of approval as he took the horse from him and climbed on it. Then he gave her the order to grab Fagin and drag him along as they began marching towards Glenwood. At this time, morning had already reached, and the bright morning sun was already up, radiating its glorious glow upon the forest path. The scene below was quite mesmerizing and chaotic at the same time. A gallant figure rode on a white horse, leading a group of more than 1,000 men towards Glenwood. It was morning hours in Glenwood, and the people could be seen moving around with smiles on their faces. Unlike Winterseed, people who got up very early to take care of their farms and go about other daily tasks, the people of Glenwood were the total opposite. The streets were filled with little children running and playing around, men making casual conversations, women putting on nice clothes to reveal their high class, and others. None of them were busy or had the need to be. A group of men sitting in front of a nice house conversed with each other. I did not have to visit my farm every day from now on. Once Lord Fagin returns with the new slaves from Winterseed, I will finally be able to leave a relaxing life of not worrying about the weeds on my farm, but rather the harvest those new slaves are going to bring for me. One of the men let out with a hearty laugh. Haha, that is it. My farm will also be taken care of by those slaves as well. I will have a lot of time to spend with my new wife. I'm going to explore her every single free time I get, another added. I can't wait to see the beautiful Winterseed women Lord Fagin is going to bring with him. The men discussed with hearty laughter, their every word revealing how much they trusted and believed in the might of their army to defeat Winterseed. None of them shared a single doubt, because they believed their victory was set in stone. After all, the number of their soldiers was almost the same, if not more, than the total number of villagers inhabiting Winterseed. With such a small number, their defeat was inevitable. Not too far away from them, the women gist among themselves with merry laughter. I heard the women of Winterseed are all young and beautiful, one of them said, bitterness dripping from her words. Of course they are, another woman chimed in, folding her arms. I've seen one or two before. They don't have a single wrinkle despite being the same age as us. Their skin is smooth as silk, and their hair shines like gold. That's why our husbands can't stop talking about them. Every time they mention those women, it's like they'll regret it soon enough, one woman said with pure hatred oozing from her voice. Wait until they bring those Winterseed women here. I'll make sure my husband never looks at another one of them again. Unlike the lustful discussions of the men, the women's were instead filled with hatred and jealousy. The men wanted to get one of the beautiful women as their concubines, but the women plotted how to stop that from happening. Nevertheless, if they all knew what was coming for them, such discussions wouldn't be taking place. Instead of thinking about obtaining slaves, they would think about every possible way to avoid being one. Winterseed Village. It has been more than 24 hours now since the men left for war, and the village has become really calm thanks to the efforts of Riella, Brandon, and the soldiers. Nevertheless, while the villagers no longer reveal their worries verbally, inwardly, they were all concerned and praying for the safe return of Lord Rowan and his soldiers. It was the afternoon hours, and Riella could be seen speaking to a group of young ladies gathered at a corner in the large village square. The ladies were of varying ages, ranging from the youngest, who was 12, to the oldest, who was in her late 20s. Riella held a small needle, a long strand of thread, and a piece of clothing, performing simple sewing tasks on it as she explained to the young ladies. They all listened attentively, their eyes shining brilliantly, showing their interest in learning. Wow, look how fast she's sewing. It's twice as fast as my mom, who claims to be an expert at it, one of the young ladies whispered. My mom has been teaching me how to sew for over 2 years, but I still can't hold a needle without injuring myself, and I don't even know how to move my hands. But just looking at Riella and listening to her teachings, I feel like I can sew anything, another added. I claim to be an expert, but her hands are so angelic with that thread and needle. The young ladies continued to discuss among themselves, and it was clear from their words that they were amazed by Riella's sewing prowess, which made them feel jealous, but in a positive way. Riella kept explaining and demonstrating, a friendly smile on her face. Every time she looked at the young ladies and observed their expressions, her joy increased, and her desire to teach them grew even stronger. Thanks to the skill book she had received from Rowan, her teachings became creative, clear, and easy to understand, even for those who hadn't tried sewing before. Even the 12-year-old girl looked enlightened as she watched her. In the beginning, Riella couldn't believe her own ability to explain with so much creativity and energy. The moment she opened her mouth to teach, her natural timidity vanished, replaced by the confidence of a skilled teacher. She had been teaching for more than 5 hours now, but she felt no sign of tiredness, either mentally or physically. Nevertheless, while the joy of teaching blossomed in her heart, her worries about Rowan's safety didn't cease. Far away from the ladies, Brandon and the soldiers observed her with smiles on their faces. Brandon was proud to see Riella smiling and doing something she loved. He saw her as his own daughter, so seeing her happy gladdened his heart. As for the young soldiers, they smiled because they felt proud of their lord for winning such a beautiful woman. Lord Rowan is a badass when it comes to women, they all thought in their minds. Glenwood. It was evening, and Glenwood was as calm and peaceful as ever. The men were still outside, drinking and celebrating the arrival of new slaves to work on their farms and the beautiful women they could woo all day with their excessive free time. The women were still plotting how to punish the new beauties, while the children played happily. At the gate, the guards sat down and drank, already celebrating the victory of their lord. No one in the village showed any signs of worry as they continued with their merriment, but it would soon come crashing down. As the villagers continued with their celebrations, suddenly, a loud trumpet blasted across the entire region of Glenwood, reaching everyone. The people who had been sitting and talking stood up abruptly, looking at each other with confused expressions. So soon? They shouldn't be back until at least tomorrow, and that's if they didn't relax along the way. One of the men said, his expression confused, but the others around him didn't share the same confusion. Are you underestimating our military? They must have arrived already and wiped out Winterseed in less time than expected. This is something to celebrate, one said with a proud smile. The trumpet signals their return, and, as the people of Glenwood, we should not ignore its meaning. Let's go welcome them, another reminded the group. The men left their drinks and hurried to the village entrance. The women did the same, as did the little children. Everyone in the village at that moment was headed toward the entrance to welcome their gallant men. They all had smiles of merriment and curiosity on their faces, eager to see their lord's return. If there were a camera zooming over the village right now, it would capture a scene of people flocking toward the gates like ants. They soon arrived at the entrance, and their expressions crumbled at once when they saw the scene before them. Their eyes quickly widened in terror. Guards were lying on the ground in pools of their own blood. Glenwood's soldiers were bound and led into the village like slaves, accompanied by a strong, fierce-looking group of men. Worst of all, their beloved Lord Fagin was being dragged like a cursed slave. In front of the large group of strangers and fellow villagers pouring into the village, a young, handsome man was riding a white horse. He had a sweet and charming smile on his face, but it seemed to hide something demonic beneath, scaring everyone. "What is this?" one of the men who had been celebrating earlier whispered to his colleagues. "This is impossible. We lost?" "How?" someone nearby said in terror. "That young man must be the Lord of Winterseed. He doesn't even look older than 18. How did he manage to defeat our strong soldiers?" Another added in disbelief. Seeing the terrifying strangers marching into their village, even the little children became frightened, clinging to their parents' legs. Both the men and women were terrified. Everything they had hoped for had crumbled right before their eyes. Rowan observed their various reactions with a calm smirk. "You have entered enemy territory, Glenwood Village. You are 60% away from conquering this territory. Good luck." The people of Glenwood stood far away from the gate and watched as Rowan led their soldiers and dragged their lord shamefully into his own territory. The looks on their faces right now were that of extreme terror, confusion, and surprise. None of them dared to speak out of place at this moment. Rowan observed their expressions as he rode closer towards them with a scheming smile on his face. After reaching a good distance, He halted and signaled for the men behind him to halt as well. This simple gesture made the people of Glenwood aware of the authority he had. They all swallowed nervously as they imagined their fate. I know you all are shocked to see a super young and handsome man like me addressing you after conquering your army, Rowan began, praising himself right from the beginning. But do not be afraid. You all are safe, Rowan said, his words causing loud sighs of relief that quickly disappeared when he added, for now. Rowan did not stop and kept on speaking, invoking fear in the hearts of everyone. Your safety today will depend on the response of your lord. If he gives me what I asked for, you all will live, and if he doesn't, you will die right after I kill him, he declared in a cold tone. Fagin's heart skipped a beat after hearing the cold threats to his people. He was already beyond disgraced at this point. Despite his military power and years of experience, he had lost to a young lad who wasn't even 20 yet. Fagin's only hope at this point was giving the staff of authority to Rowan. As long as Rowan didn't reveal what he was asking for, Fagin might be able to hide the fact that he no longer had it and continue ruling over his people. Nevertheless, this little hope was shattered. The Glenwood people were still reacting to Rowan's last words, whispering among themselves, expressing their fears and confusion, when Rowan silenced them with a simple hand gesture. Do you all want me to reveal what I want? Rowan asked in a playful voice. Fagin's eyes widened after hearing his statement. No, please, he pleaded immediately. If Rowan revealed it, not only his position, but his life would be threatened. Rowan heard Fagin's scare protest and gave him a sharp glare, causing him to shiver. Did I give you permission to speak? Fagin shook his head and immediately tried to plead more. But please. Nevertheless, he wasn't able to complete his statement when Bryce gave him a heartfelt slap on the face and told him to shut the hell up. Fagin could only give up and stare at the ground, embarrassed. Rowan returned his attention to the people, who still refused to answer his question. He demanded in a threatening voice, Do you want me to reveal it? Yes or yes? This time, they all looked among themselves, confused. What sort of question ends with yes or yes? But they had no choice. They immediately responded with a thundering yes. Rowan smiled in response and told them what he wanted. As expected, they all gasped. If your lord tries to act tough and refuses my request, you will all die alongside him, Rowan added with a smile following their reactions. Fagin was already shivering at this moment, his future and legacy shattered before his eyes. There was no hope left. Once I give him the staff of authority, I'll escape from the village, he made up his mind. On the other hand, Rowan continued to speak to the people. After he finished speaking, he requested his conquest status. You're 50% away from conquering Glenwood. Good luck. I just need the staff of authority to finalize everything, Rowan thought. Rowan gave orders to his soldiers. He told the captains to accompany him to retrieve the staff of authority while the others stayed behind to watch over Glenwood's soldiers, preventing any sort of protest. After giving the order, he pulled the reins and rode toward the crowd, who began making way fearfully. As Rowan rode past them, he observed their depressed emotions, and a smile crept on his face. He was really satisfied with their emotions at this moment. This would serve as payback for the sadness, depression, and hard work his people had endured just to feed them. The captains walked gallantly behind him, and even they were satisfied with the scared eyes fixed on them. Bryce didn't miss the opportunity to snort at the men staring at him. Ren also came with them, as he was the one dragging Fagin along. He walked behind Rowan so they could communicate. How do you feel now, fatty virgin? Rowan asked mockingly. Fagin heard the mispronunciation of his name, but didn't even dare to refute it. He couldn't even answer the question Rowan asked. Are you deaf? Rowan glared at him intensely. The next time I repeat a question, I'll burst your balloon of a belly and watch your insides pour out. I'm sorry. I was thinking of my answer. Fagin immediately apologized. I feel really bad, he answered the question. You feel bad? What are you trying to insinuate here? That I'm wicked. Rowan furrowed his brows. No, that's not what I meant. I feel good. Rowan laughed, seeing the fat man struggling to speak. His reactions were amusing, but Rowan couldn't wait to see what his reaction would be when it was time for him to die. As they passed through the crowd, The people behind him began to whisper among themselves. This is not good at all. Our village would be riddled with bad luck and shame after this loss. One of them whispered, "The Lord, is he really going to surrender?" Another woman muttered, her voice barely audible, "I never thought I'd see him like this. He looks so scared, like a little baby." Another replied. At the back of the crowd, a group of men whispered among themselves, "We need to help." Rowan and his captains escorted Fagin to his quarters to get the staff of authority. They were able to move freely thanks to the fact that all the villagers had gathered at the entrance of the village and were being guided by the soldiers. Nevertheless, even after escorting for more than 1 hour, they still haven't gotten to Fagin's place, which revealed just how big his territory was. "I can make my people come live in this place, but then I will have to kill all of Glenwood's villagers," Rowan contemplated as they made their way down to Fagin's place. If killing would ensure the evolution of his territory and the happiness of his people, he wouldn't mind killing even 1,000 innocent people with his own hands. Sadly, he needed more people to evolve his territory, which made the idea a really bad one. Rowan brainstormed many ideas to solve the issues, but he finally made up his mind to think about it after obtaining the staff of authority. After escorting for another hour, they finally arrived at a building that stood out from all the other buildings they had seen so far. It was bigger, with nice wall paintings, and there was a fence and gate protecting it, which wasn't present at the other houses. Rowan and his captains didn't even have to question Fagin before confirming that this was his place. "This is it," Fagin spoke up. "I know. You wasted a lot of resources building this place," Rowan snorted. Fagin didn't respond, already too afraid of Rowan. "We don't have all day. Get inside and bring me what I asked for," Rowan said, giving him a slap on the back of his head. I will. Give me a minute," Fagin responded immediately and pushed his fat body forward. He tripped and fell to the ground, unable to move his body properly due to exhaustion. "How the heck did your people let you rule them when you're this weak and useless?" Rowan asked, unable to help himself. If Fagin were placed in a fight with a 10-year-old, the 10-year-old would most likely emerge victorious. "Run. Take him inside and make sure he doesn't try to escape or do something stupid." Rin nodded and helped Fagin up from the ground before dragging him toward the house. Fagin was breathing hard, as if he had just escaped a lion's den. Rowan and his captains waited outside. Rowan ordered his men to form a defensive perimeter around the fences to prevent any unplanned actions from Fagin. Fagin gave directions while Rowan dragged him along. "You are my best advisor. I even made sure your family lived the best of lives. And still, you betrayed me," Fagin said with a hateful tone. "You deserved it," Rin snorted. "I warned you from the start, but you never took my advice. You never appreciated any of the hard work I put into my position because my advice always went against your stupid plans. So I figured I'd pledge my loyalty to someone smart enough not to reject my advice," Rin continued. "And if you think you lost because I betrayed you, you're underestimating Lord Rowan. He had everything figured out from the beginning. Even without my involvement, he would have won," Rin concluded, pushing Fagin to move forward. Fagin heard this and couldn't help but shiver with hatred. "You disobeyed the laws of our ancestors just because I didn't listen to you? You should be ashamed of yourself," Fagin responded. Rin couldn't help but laugh, finding Fagin's response amusing. "Our past leaders were never as dumb or as evil as you. They stopped watching over you the moment you began defiling those innocent women." Rin and Fagin went back and forth with their conversation. Fagin's words were filled with hatred and disappointment, while Rin responded only because he felt like it. He had long since given up his loyalty to Fagin. He had only followed him before because he hadn't had the perfect opportunity to tell him the truth and leave. Seeing that Rin wasn't showing any remorse or respect, Fagin tried to strike a deal. "Help me escape, and I'll promote you. You'll be in a position where no one in Glenwood is above you. Accept me. I'll give you authority over half the village." "How does that sound?" Ren gritted his teeth at the offer. "You're a fool if you think I'll accept your ridiculous offer. If you believe I'll help you, then you're dumber than I thought. But Ren, think about it. Half of Glenwood at your feet. You'll have power, respect, anything you want." Ren scoffed, tightening his grip on Fagin's arm. "Do you think it will work on me? After everything you've done? Power under you means nothing. I'd still be serving a fool, and I'm done with that. Desperation crept into Fagin's voice as he continued. We can split the wealth. I can even make sure your family lives like royalty, whatever you want. Just let me walk away. Rin stopped abruptly, turning to face Fagin with cold, sharp eyes. Walk away? You're bargaining with the wrong person. You're the reason Glenwood fell apart, and now you expect me to save you for scraps of power. You don't understand. Fagin stammered. Rowan will kill me. He'll kill all of us. If I don't give him the staff, it's over. I can still help you, Rin. Just let me. Fagin kept pleading with Rin for his life, knowing he had no chance and that Rin had no reason to be loyal after everything that had happened. Fagin even went so far as to offer to help Rin marry as many women as he wanted, but this only angered Rin more. He threw Fagin to the ground and started punching him. At the entrance of Glenwood, the people were still gathered, and the soldiers remained bound, kneeling on the ground before the Winter Seed men. However, amidst the crowd, chaos was brewing. A group of men were plotting to sabotage the peace. We can't let them take over our village while we're still alive, one shouted angrily. If they take the staff of authority, our village will be nothing but a target for every village around us, another added. That bastard is still very young. I can't let him rule over the village, when even I haven't dreamt of ruling over it. Then we have to act fast, one of them suggested. We need to help Lord Fagin secure the staff of authority and ensure these bastards don't lay their hands on it, he continued. If we can pull this off, Lord Fagin will definitely give us new positions, and we will be able to take some of the beautiful women for ourselves with our new positions. The others nodded in agreement. They discussed the matter further and came to a decision to take action. The Winter Seed men guarding the Glenwood soldiers remained vigilant, ensuring none of the Glenwood soldiers had a chance to react. However, they soon heard a commotion coming from the crowd in front of them. They turned their attention to the crowd and saw people misbehaving. Some young men were pushing each other, breaking the line. Others were fighting, and a few ran around, generating enough noise to irritate the soldiers. Hey, all of you shut up. Winston, one of Rowan's soldiers, barked. But the commotion continued, as if no one had heard him. Winston and some of his colleagues drew their swords and marched toward the crowd to restore order. I said, shut the hell up. Winston barked again. This time, the front rows of the crowd settled a little. The youths who had stepped out of line returned to their positions, and things calmed down somewhat, though not to the level of quiet from before. One of the soldiers raised his sword, his eyes scanning the crowd. If you know what's good for you, stay quiet. Another soldier added, his voice sharp, anyone else causes trouble, and they'll answer to us directly. The crowd murmured, but the sight of the Winter Seed soldiers' weapons was enough to quiet most of the unrest. Meanwhile, amidst the crowd, the group that had planned to sabotage Rowan's plans nodded to each other, pleased with the success of their distraction. They slipped away from the crowd and moved toward the buildings behind them. With the soldiers focused on maintaining order, they were able to sneak away without getting caught. We need to reach him before they take control, one whispered as they moved through the narrow paths between houses. I'd rather die than let these bastards take our village without a fight, another said through gritted teeth. We'll make sure they don't get the staff of authority. Fagin may be weak, but he's still our lord. If they take the staff, Glenwood is as good as gone. The others nodded in agreement, their footsteps silent as they made their way toward their destination, determined expressions on their faces. Only after beating Fagin to his satisfaction did Rin let him go. Fagin remained on the ground, breathing really fast, his face swollen from the harsh punches Rin unleashed on him without mercy. Rin glared at his flinching figure on the ground before grabbing him up again and pushing him toward his secret chamber, where he claimed the staff of authority was. They passed through narrow passages with torches on the walls, lighting it up. After walking for a few more seconds, they arrived in front of a door made of hard steel with a weird and secure-looking lock. "This is the secret chamber," Fagin said immediately after they arrived. "What are you waiting for then? Open the door and bring out the staff of authority," Rin snorted. But Fagin didn't budge and only stared at the door, lost for words and unsure of what action to take next. "You are wasting time. Do you want another round of beating to get your shit together?" Rin threatened. Only after hearing the threats did Fagin make a move and pull out a key from his underpants, handing it to Rowan. "You must be sick in the head if you think I'll touch something that came out of your disgusting body," Rin snorted. Fagin didn't respond and proceeded to unlock the door. The steel door creaked open with an annoying noise, revealing the darkness within the secret chamber. Rin quickly left to grab the torch he had seen on his way here, and then both of them entered the room. With the torch, the contents hidden in the secret chamber were revealed: beautiful robes, large bags of copper coins, and a massive chest in the center of the room. Rin couldn't help but gasp as he saw the contents of the secret chamber. He had been working in this place for a really long time, but never thought such expensive treasures were hidden here. "You had all this, and you never brought it out when we needed it for important developments," he berated Fagin. At this point, Fagin was already too devastated and dejected to even respond. Rin snorted and dragged him towards the treasure chest, where the staff of authority was obviously hidden. Fagin told him where the key to the chest was. It was in a secret opening in the wall. Rin took it and opened the chest with it, but was left dumbfounded afterward. Both Fagin and Rin stared at the empty chest, their expressions dumbfounded. "Someone has stolen it already," Fagin yelled out. Before he could say another word, a loud commotion came from outside. It was evening, and it was already getting dark in Glenwood. Outside Fagin's place, Rowan sat on his house, analyzing the houses around him, observing the structures and materials used in building them as he made plans to replicate the design in Winterseed. Nevertheless, as he brainstormed ideas, a group of men came running towards him with machetes, axes, and other farm tools, which were being used as weapons in this situation. Rowan counted, and they appeared to number more than 50. "You filthy rat, get out of Glenwood immediately and return to your godforsaken village. You will not succeed, you little brat. You will pay for killing my son in battle." The men yelled, hatred and anger thundering in their loud voices as they approached Rowan. Bryce and Josh saw the men approaching and quickly unsheathed their weapons, ready to engage in battle. Oliver and Bruce, who were at the back guarding, also heard the commotion and quickly made their way towards Rowan. "Lord Rowan, stay back. We will deal with them for you," Oliver said as he positioned himself in front of Rowan. But Rowan signaled him to relax as he rode his horse forward toward the men. The men halted just a few feet away from him and pointed their weapons at his face. "We will kill you and your captains here if you don't leave Lord Fagin alone. The staff of authority does not belong to you or your village." They barked at him while maintaining more than 12 feet of distance away from him. Rowan observed them with a scowl and asked, "Are you done barking?" "What? This brat. Do you not know how to respect your elders?" They reacted instantly. Thankfully, they succeeded in pissing off the already furious Bryce even more. "Brat? Who among you said those words just now?" The men looked at Bryce and refused to answer. Although Bryce had many wounds on his body, his huge figure made him really threatening to the men who hadn't been to war or had any sort of training beforehand. "I asked a question." Bryce barked again. The men remained silent. Rowan waved at Bryce to calm down before facing the men. He could tell that none of them feared him as much as they feared Bryce, thanks to his age and slim physique. But he had to prove them wrong. Getting his ego trampled upon by monkeys was something Rowan would not accept. "It appears none of you have any respect for me, so I will teach you how to respect me," he smirked. Then he brought out his favorite dagger from his inventory. The men looked among themselves in terror as they saw a menacing dagger appear out of nowhere. My captain asked a question earlier, and I need an answer right away, Rowan demanded in a cold tone. Bloodlust boost has been activated. They all shivered at the coldness of his tone. Are you deaf? Rowan barked at them. Immediately, the men who had acted impulsively earlier pointed at the culprit in fear. The culprit looked at his fellow men, his eyes widening. He couldn't believe they had sold him out so easily. But why should I be afraid of him? He looks no older than my last son, he concluded inwardly and stepped out with his machete. I said it, he declared boldly and continued. What are you going to do? Sadly, he wasn't able to complete his statement when the dagger in Rowan's hands darted toward him at a menacing and inevitable speed. His eyes widened, and he tried to react, but it was too late. The blade of the dagger stabbed his neck, and he immediately began to choke, grabbing his neck and trying so hard to breathe, but it was impossible. His body slumped on the ground, and he gave up the ghost. No, he killed Baba Solo. Baba Solo is dead. The men behind him reacted fearfully, their eyes widened in terror and their bodies shivering. Rowan observed their expressions with a scowl as he ignored the measly 5 evolution points he gained for killing the bastard lying on the ground. Just a mere 5 evolution points? So useless, he noted inwardly and signaled to one of the men, "Bring my dagger to me." They looked among themselves, and one of them summoned the courage to bring him his dagger, shivering as he dragged it out of his colleague and brought it to Rowan. Rowan then asked him to clean the blood off the dagger with his own tongue, humiliating him in the worst way possible. He tried to plead, but seeing the dark look in Rowan's eyes, he didn't hesitate and hurriedly licked the dagger clean. His colleagues watched his actions with disgust and horror. Only then did they realize how scary Rowan was. Rowan didn't even have to request that they disarm themselves before they began dropping their weapons and kneeling on the ground. Rowan snorted at their actions as he kept his dagger in his inventory. He gave them a reprimanding speech and invoked more fear in their hearts. As Rowan instilled fear in their hearts, the gate opened and Rowan and Fagin walked out. Fagin wore a terrified and worried expression on his face and let out in a dejected voice, "The staff of authority has been stolen." What do you mean the staff of authority is missing? Are you telling a joke or what? Rowan asked with a dark expression on his face. Fagin remained speechless as he looked at the ground, as if seeking an answer from it. He couldn't even believe his own discovery. The staff missing meant someone was already planning to seize his position from the very beginning. That person might have hidden the staff of authority, waiting for the perfect moment to strike and seize his position. But he couldn't help but wonder who that person was and where they had taken his staff of authority. The realization that the position he was proud of had already been sabotaged before the war made him even more dejected. Rowan observed his expression and demeanor. He could tell that Fagin was telling the truth. Fuck, this is the only way I can get my hands on a staff of authority right now. Rowan cursed inwardly. Who amongst your people do you suspect? He asked. Fagin shook his head and replied, There is no one I suspect. What the heck? How can you not suspect anyone? You're a bastard who knows nothing other than eating, defiling women, and making wrong choices. You should know that your people loathe you, and there must be someone who has openly shown hatred for you. Rowan barked at him. The more he looked at Fagin, the more he felt the urge to punch him to death. I think I know someone. Rin spoke up after a few seconds. Rowan gave him a questioning look, urging him to speak. Even Fagin listened carefully. Throughout his reign, he had trusted everyone and relied on the protection of the ancestors. He had never suspected anyone. Stannis, Rin replied instantly. There have been rumors among the low-ranking soldiers that he had his eyes on Alara and the other women Lord Fagin kept for himself. There were talks that he planned to kill Fagin and take his women. The more Rin explained, the wider Fagin's eyes grew. Even the men kneeling on the ground couldn't believe what they were hearing. I know about his disgusting lust for my women, but I never suspected he'd consider killing his lord for such a foolish reason, Rowan commented. However, he realized that Stannis' decision was natural, given his position in the village. He was the strongest man, while his lord was just a glutton with no strength. The urge to dominate would certainly be there. It all makes sense now that I think about it. Rowan nodded in realization. On the other hand, Fagin found the information too hard to believe. His most trusted soldier had been planning to kill him all along, and he had never suspected a thing. You said you defeated Stannis already? Which means he's dead. He's the only suspect, the only one who might know the whereabouts of the Staff of Authority, Fagin tried to explain. He had only been told that Rowan defeated Stannis, and didn't know Stannis was still alive. You shouldn't worry. That bastard is still alive, Rowan smirked. He felt relieved that he had chosen not to kill Stannis earlier, even when he had the chance. This would have been a hell of a difficult task if that bastard were dead. Rowan sighed inwardly. Let's return to the others. Stannis is with them, he said as he pulled the reins and began riding away. What should we do about these men? Bruce asked, pointing his sword at the men kneeling on the ground. Rowan tilted his head back, observing their terrified faces. Some are already shedding tears, pleading for mercy. Fagin and Run looked at Rowan, waiting for his answer as well. There's no benefit in killing these bastards, and no consequence either. I could have done it myself, but they're worthless, Rowan thought. He waved his hand, giving the captain's approval to do as they pleased. Fagin and Ren's eyes widened in surprise. Meanwhile, the captains grinned and moved toward the men, who scrambled on the ground, pleading for their lives. No, spare me. I never wanted to join them. They forced me. Don't kill me. I don't want to die. Rowan continued forward without looking back. Run dragged Fagin along with him. As Rowan neared the gate, a notification suddenly popped up before him, causing his eyes to widen. Fuck, he cursed out loud, quickly jumping off his horse and sprinting at full speed toward the border. Chaos was brewing. At the border of Glenwood, a crowd of more than 7,000 people caused a chaotic commotion, much worse than the earlier disturbance from the men who had already faced the consequences. The youth and a few middle-aged men from Glenwood were tossing large stones at Winterseed soldiers. Some grabbed heavy objects from the ground and rushed toward the Winterseed soldiers, who were trying their best to calm the commotion while also guarding the surrendered soldiers. As they attacked Rowan's men, they hurled insults and curses. Get back to your village, you pathetic bastards. You'll be our slaves soon. Your lord is already dead. You should just give up. Their curses left the Winterseed soldiers confused. How could their lord Rowan be dead? Everyone under Captain Bryce, come with me. Let's defend against these bastards while the rest of you stay on guard. We can't let them get close to their soldiers, or they might free them, and things will become much harder for us. Winston ordered loudly as he grabbed his sword, watching the people charging toward them with heavy objects, ready to attack. Thanks to the large number of people in Glenwood, even the attacks from their untrained men became a big threat to the soldiers, who were less than 1/10 of their population. Fuck all these bastards, one of the soldiers near Winston shouted, attacking without hesitation. The others followed suit, attacking as well. But as they charged toward the incoming attackers, more people from Glenwood joined in, making the battle even more intense and difficult. They clashed, and casualties began almost immediately. Men from both Glenwood and Winterseed fell to the ground following It was still the fairly bright hours of the evening in Glenwood, and a figure could be seen sprinting through the deserted streets. 3 of your soldiers have been killed. Casualty rate has reached 9%. Any more casualties will result in a deduction from your quest reward. These notifications rang in Rowan's ears as he made his way toward the entrance, running at a speed even the fastest athlete on Earth wouldn't be able to comprehend. Soon enough, the villagers of Glenwood came into view, and the scene in front of him wasn't peaceful at all. He saw a lot of Glenwood people engaged in a violent protest, some screaming haltingly, while others grew hostile and rushed toward the front, where his soldiers were stationed. What the fuck happened? Rowan queried inwardly as he drew 2 swords from his inventory and approached the crowd. He swung his swords at anyone standing in his path as he made his way toward the front row. Get the fuck out of my way, he barked, his cold voice drifting across the noisy crowd. A few of the Glenwood villagers quickly noticed him, their eyes widening in shock. Wasn't he supposed to be dead by now? What was he doing here? They asked themselves. Rowan didn't bother to observe their expressions as he slaughtered his way to the front without restraint. He would rather take many innocent lives than lose his men and his precious evolution points. After a few more slaughters, he finally reached the front of the noisy crowd, where a lot of youths were engaged in battle with the soldiers, using their numbers to overpower them. Rowan wanted to yell at the people to stop, but he decided to speak with his actions instead. The larger crowd behind him, having already noticed his presence, fell silent while some cried over their deceased family members. They were speechless at this moment. The young men fighting the Winter Seed soldiers continued, unaware of Rowan's presence. Winston could be seen defending himself against 3 young Glenwood men who swung big sticks at his head. He gritted his teeth and held his sword tightly to block their attacks. "No one will come to save you. Your lord and his captains are already dead," the young men cursed as they swung their heavy sticks, each attack laced with hatred. "Who told you that?" Before they could launch another strike, a sinister voice came from behind, followed by a swish, the last sound they ever heard as their lifeless bodies slumped to the ground. Winston looked at the corpses of the 3 young men, then turned to Rowan. "Thank you for saving me, Lord Rowan. These bastards started rioting all of a sudden, and we had to break formation to defend ourselves." Winston explained the situation to Rowan. "You did a great job," Rowan replied quickly before moving to save his other soldiers. He opened the Divine Beast plane, letting Blaze out to provide support. After 20 minutes, most of the hostile youths from Glenwood lay dead on the ground, and the crowd had realized Rowan's presence and his devilish battle prowess. The rest of the youths dropped their sticks and escaped back into the crowd. Rowan looked at the cowering figures with a frown. He also observed the expressions of the large crowd, who now looked at him with fear. This time, he didn't bother to address the crowd to invoke fear. His actions had already taken care of that. Nevertheless, he couldn't help but be bothered about the young soldiers he had lost. He looked at the corpses on the ground with a solemn expression, wondering how he would compensate their loved ones. "Fuck, I need that staff ASAP," he concluded. "Where is Stannis?" "Bring him to me," he asked Winston. Winston responded immediately and ran to the back. He returned later, dragging a bloodied Stannis, then tossed him to the ground in front of Rowan. Rowan didn't waste time and grabbed Stannis by the neck, waking him from his subconscious state. "Where is the staff of authority you stole?" "Huh?" Stannis struggled to decipher Rowan's words. Seeing his reaction, Rowan scoffed and planted a resounding slap across his face before asking again. "I said, where's the fucking staff of authority you stole from Fagin? Hand it over now." Only after the slap did Stannis understand his situation. His heartbeat quickened, and his mind wandered. How did he find out? Sadly, Rowan had already wasted much time and didn't leave him any chance to collect his thoughts. He grabbed his dagger and stabbed Stannis in the thigh, causing him to cry out in anguish. "Speak now. I have no time to waste," Rowan reprimanded. "I will speak. Please don't hurt me," Stannis pleaded. "You'd better speak, or I will keep stabbing," Rowan snorted. Stannis gulped nervously before revealing where he had hidden the staff of authority. After obtaining the information, Rowan moved away from Stannis and approached one of the kneeling Glenwood soldiers, grabbing him by the collar. "Take me to his place immediately." The soldier nodded and led Rowan into the village, towards Stannis' house. This time, the crowd cleared a path the moment they saw Rowan approaching with one of their soldiers as a hostage. After Rowan passed the crowd, he noticed Run and the others arriving. Bryce and the other captains rushed toward him to find out why he had suddenly taken off like that. Rowan didn't have time to explain and simply told them to go see for themselves. He also ordered Roland to hold Fagin and wait for him in front of the crowd. He gave a few more instructions before dragging the soldier along. Roland and the others pushed through the crowd and arrived at the front, where the gruesome scene awaited them. A large number of corpses sprawled across the border, most of them from Glenwood, while a few were from Winterseed. They all had the same question Rowan had when he first arrived. Meanwhile, Rowan didn't stop until he stood before Stannis' place. Stannis' house was much larger and more beautiful than the others. Though it wasn't as grand as Fagin's, it was still far superior to anything Rowan had seen so far. The house had no fences, just like the other houses. Rowan observed the perimeter of the house for a few seconds. Open the door, he ordered the soldier, who obeyed without hesitation. The soldier shivered as he approached the door and reached to open it, but it didn't budge. He turned nervously toward Rowan and reported in a low tone, "Sir, it's locked." "I guessed as much," Rowan snorted. He pushed the soldier aside and strolled toward the door. Clenching his fist, he slammed it into the door, creating a large hole. He then tore the door apart with his supernatural strength, causing the soldier behind him to stare in astonishment. After tearing the door open, Rowan stared into the dark interior for a few seconds. Luckily, Rowan had night vision and could see the interior clearly and brightly, unlike the soldier. Nevertheless, even with his clear view of the inside, Rowan didn't let his guard down. This bastard has the most valuable item in his house. He definitely has some sort of protection against intruders, he noted to himself before turning to the puzzled soldier. "Step inside," he ordered coldly. "Why, yes, sir." The soldier didn't think twice about Rowan's command and started toward the house. Rowan watched as he took the first step inside. No unnatural reaction. "Keep moving," Rowan ordered again to ensure his own safety. As expected, the soldier didn't question it and kept moving. After all, this was the house of his captain, and he wasn't afraid of walking in. Rowan observed him as he took his second, third, and fourth steps, until the darkness swallowed him completely. However, as the soldier took his fifth step, the sound of objects colliding echoed across the room. Rowan heard it. The soldier's eyes darted around, searching for the source of the noise. He spotted a shiny object moving rapidly toward him from behind. He tried to speak, but it was too late. The object pierced his chest, creating excruciating pain that made him scream in agony before falling silent as he died. Rowan, having observed everything, sighed in disappointment, regretting not bringing more soldiers to test the place for traps. "Never mind, I have night vision and attack perception. I can defend myself against any traps with those," he concluded and stepped into the building. He moved through the narrow passage and reached the room that matched the description Stannis had given. He tore the door open and stepped inside. There were large wine barrels neatly arranged around the room. Rowan couldn't help but wonder why one person would greedily store so much wine. If Rowan's calculation is correct, the amount of wine in this room will be able to fill up 300 men at least. That bastard surely has some weird fetish, thought Rowan. He said the barrel with a XX mark at the bottom has the staff of authority. He muttered as he scanned the body of the wine barrels. His eyes finally landed on one of the barrels with the said mark. Rowan smirked as he made his way toward it, eager to get his hands on the staff of authority. He slid off the cover gently, and his eyes fell upon a strange-looking item resting brilliantly at the bottom of the empty barrel. "Ding! You have found wood-grade staff of authority." As soon as Rowan opened the barrel of wine, a small object about the length of an adult's arm was revealed inside. Its handle was made of wood and bore undecipherable engravings, giving it a mysterious feel. One end was plain, while the other was spherical. On the spherical end, there was a yellow-colored engraved crystal. Rowan realized what it was the moment he set his eyes on it: the staff of authority. With a fulfilled expression on his face, Rowan reached out and grabbed the staff of authority. "Ding! You have found wood-grade staff of authority." "Ding! Congratulations! You have completed one criterion to evolve your territory." Staff of authority, wood-grade, the emblem of authority for FF and F-grade territories. Note: it can't be upgraded. Rowan studied the brief description before returning his gaze to it, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. "System, reveal the other criteria to evolve my territory," he ordered. "TO, evolve territory to F rank. You must have land, 40 square kilometers, current, 20 square kilometers. Population, 5,000, current, 3,000. 500 active soldiers, current, 470. Military power, F rank, current, FF rank. Agriculture, F rank, current, FF rank. Power, F rank, current, FF rank. Wood grade authority staff, completed. Studying the information presented, Rowan smirked. With the Staff of Authority acquired, I can use Glenwood to manipulate my results and improve my territory ranking to F, he declared aloud. Without hesitation, he closed the window and walked out of the building, stepping over the corpse of the dead soldier as he made his way outside. Night had already arrived, and the moon had taken its position in the sky, driving away the darkness with its brilliant crescent glow. Rowan began strolling through the darkness, the Staff of Authority tightly grasped in his hands. In his head, he prepared the best set of speeches to use when he reached the border. He couldn't help but mutter to himself continuously, practicing how to present them. This would be his biggest moment yet, and he didn't want to fumble it. Meanwhile, at the border, the people of Glenwood had finally calmed themselves down after witnessing the brutal strength of Rowan. After he left, they went out to carry the corpses of loved ones who had lost their lives to him. While they grieved their loss, they didn't dare to blame or harbor any revengeful thoughts against Rowan. Unfortunately, the casualties weren't only on Glenwood's side, as Winterseed soldiers also grieved the deaths of their 12 colleagues. Aside from the 12 who lost their lives, about 50 more soldiers sustained ghastly wounds. A few even lost consciousness due to the pain. Fortunately, there was Rowan, who had a little medical knowledge. He was able to take care of the injured soldiers and reduce the intensity of their pain with certain manual procedures and applications of an herbal ointment he personally prepared. Liera assisted him, improving the efficiency of his task. Not too far away, Fagin sat on the ground close to the almost lifeless body of Stannis. He gazed up at the dark sky with a frustrated expression on his face, unable to stop thinking about his current predicament. He looked down beside him at Stannis, who was struggling to breathe. He still hadn't gotten over the realization that his best captain was actually ready to betray him from the very beginning. Once I am done settling all these issues, I will make sure to kill you myself, Stannis, he swore inwardly. The hatred and anger he felt towards Stannis kept growing every second. Nevertheless, his malicious thoughts were cut off as he heard a commotion arising from the crowd nearby, and he quickly looked in that direction to see what was happening. With the help of the moonlight, he was able to see Rowan walking out of the crowd. He could see a familiar object in his hands, the Staff of Authority. He found it, he muttered in shock. The Staff of Authority of Glenwood is gone now, he continued in a low tone as he observed Rowan, his eyes revealing all sorts of depressed and sad emotions. Roland, Bryce, Bruce, Josh, and every other soldier who understood the significance of the item Rowan held observed him with looks filled with pride, respect, and unwavering loyalty. On the other hand, the people of Glenwood stared at Rowan with terrified and worried expressions on their faces. He's holding the Staff of Authority. A teenage boy pointed at the staff to his father with a shocked expression. His father immediately gave him a quick slap on the mouth to shut him up, as he didn't want his son to draw any attention to the scary young Lord of Winterseed. Nevertheless, even with the slap, the teenager didn't give up and continued pestering his father curiously for answers. Since Lord Fagin no longer possesses the Staff of Authority, does that mean he is our new lord? What will happen to Lord Fagin and us? Will the ancestors be angry? He asked a barrage of questions, but his father refused to answer any of them. Around the father-son duo, the crowd whispered among themselves, sharing the same question. What will become the fate of our village? Rowan heard their discussions, and a smirk crept onto his face. As he made his way down to the right spot in front of the crowd, he observed the expression of Fagin and gave him a crazed smile, causing the fat ex-lord to shiver in terror. Rowan gave a hand signal to the soldiers standing beside Fagin and Stannis to bring them forward. The soldiers obeyed immediately and dragged both of them towards Rowan. Stannis was in a half-sleep, half-dead phase, and everything happening around him was nothing but unclear and blurry. On the other hand, Fagin's heart beat rapidly as he anticipated Rowan's next actions, praying frivolously for them to favor him. Rowan halted after creating a considerable distance between himself and the large crowd. The soldiers dragging Stannis and Fagin had already arrived and placed the two of them behind him. At this moment, everyone standing observed the distorted and shameful state of their two top leaders. Their looks were filled with disappointment. Fagin couldn't help but return his gaze to the ground, ashamed, while Stannis didn't even understand his current situation. Rowan smirked, observing their reactions before turning to the crowd and beginning his speech. "People of Glenwood, I would love to introduce you to your new lord," he declared in a loud, authoritative voice. Fagin's eyes widened immediately, and his body shivered. Was he planning, he thought,